UCS training team. I'm here with Mr. Brian Barrachina, who was showing his camera. Thank you, Brian, for connecting. And so between both of us, we will deliver this this session for senior functions in the supply chain planning tool. So thank you everybody for joining. And the idea for this training is actually to give you an overview of how the supply chain planning tool works in terms of gross demand and the demand, and also try to summarize what could be the functions of the of some of the roles. No, mainly in this case, if you are participating on this training, probably you have been appointed as local demand planner, senior demand planner, or as a supply chain manager in the supply chain planning tool, or you might be also someone who got price planner role. So the session, I'm going to share my screen and I'll give you an idea of how we're going to structure this this session, and then we will start right away with the content. I will be presenting for the first let's say 1 hour and 15 minutes. Then we'll have some demonstrations also performed by Brian, and then we'll have other discussions at the end. If you have any question at any moment, or something of what we explain is not clear, or it doesn't make sense for the information that you have, just feel free to ask. You can use the chat for that purpose, and we will be monitoring that. And then if we need further details on your question, we will give you the floor as well. Okay, I'm happy to see some of you we met in the past in previous trainings as well. So good to see you. And I'm going to share my screen, and maybe Brian, if you can confirm if you can see it in a few seconds. Yes, and as Brian said, we are going to be recording this session. So if it happens that you lose connection or something like that, don't be stressed. You can always get the recording back. Brian, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can, David.
Okay, so these are the topics of the day, and I will introduce another one. But yeah, as a general idea, we will have first an overview of gross demand and net demand in the supply chain planning tool. Then we will have some demonstrations and a few other quick presentations. But this first hour is going to be quite intense in terms of content and concepts. So because some of you, if I'm not wrong, would be the first time that you go through this let's say overview. So we'll go through some concepts that are particularly important for gross demand and demand, and for that I'm going to follow a presentation. Okay, so because there is so much content, and this training is kind of condensed in 4 hours, but normally we deliver this in a much wider training. So we'll maybe stop after gross demand block, so we'll try to keep the flow, okay, and then I'll stop from time to time to try to address questions. All right, so let's start, if it's okay with you. And the idea is to first have an overview. This is not the presentation, so I have to open the other one. Just give me a second. One moment. It should be this one. Yeah. Okay. Now it makes sense. All right. So let's start. This is about the supply chain planning tool. This is more or less the agenda of the presentation. So I will kindly ask you to keep attention during this presentation, and then please ask your question. As an introduction, very briefly, we all belong to the supply chain process, right? And we, at the supply chain in UN, we have a number of challenges that goes from the geographical location, silo approach to our supply chain operations sometimes, fragmented data, insufficient sometimes collaboration, lack of information, and that it also shows sometimes cost inefficiencies. All these challenges that you probably know better than I do, generate have some negative impacts on our supply chain structure or process, right? From our inability to sometimes predict our demand, lack of quality in our data. Sometimes we have our stock levels too low, not running out of stock, or sometimes we have surplus. And another of these weaknesses is like our demand is annual based, and we also have this sort of that we have seen in the entities in the missions for quite a long time. Our kind of silo approach to these supply chain operations, and then it also implies that we have a lack of agility, right, to adapt to the new situation. It's true that in terms of supply chain planning, from the moment from when we started with spreadsheets and everything, there have been certain evolution with the adoption of the DAP tool, the demand acquisition planning tool, that it already aggregated some functionality, right? That was, for example, integration with some contract data or the different product IDs that we need to plan in terms of supply chain. Now with the supply chain planning tool, let's say we continue with that evolution, and that will help us as an organization to predict better what needs to be consumed in the future, because we will be analyzing consumption that is tracked in Umoja already, and that will give us a sort of advanced planning for our predictions as well. So with that very important slide, this one and the following two, that bring or help us transfer the message of what is really changing with the supply chain planning tool. And it's actually something very important as well for senior demand planners, because they need to, I believe, as a part of this supply chain process, you need to understand what is this the planning paradigm shift that we are mentioning. So from today, where mostly in most of the entities, the supply chain planning is a bit driven by budget planning, right? So most of the entities, when we are preparing the budget, when we are formulating the budget, is where we think about what we want to acquire, right? So, but with the implementation of the supply chain planning tool, we are also aiming to change the mindset from budget planning to actually supply chain planning. So not too much thinking about what is the amount of money that we need, or what are the items that we need to acquire to actually formulate the budget, but how many items we need, of what type, and to be received when. So it's more about a perspective from the supply chain management point of view, rather than thinking on budget, right? So we are moving from what would be budget planning, and you will realize that some of the questions that we will get during the session will be oriented to budget, because we have been pretty much driven by budget formulation process in terms of planning. And we have to move to the proper supply chain planning, which is not really thinking about how much, what is the dollar amount that we need to meet certain requirements. And then together with this change of mindset that is very important, we are moving from a planning that is based on purchase orders. So we used to analyze what we were acquiring in the past to determine what we will need to acquire. But we are moving from that paradigm to consumption-based planning. So what the supply chain planning tool is going to bring is strong analysis of what was consumed in the past and how it will be consumed or how we forecast to be consumed in the future. All right, and then as well, this brings us the supply chain planning tool brings other possibilities. That is from planning only at PID level, only a product ID level, either for services or goods, will allow different planning levels to be applied when we are performing planning. So not only planning at a product ID, but maybe for a group of products, it will be possible. This is a very short introduction, but with few important concepts. So the first one was the moving from the consumption-based planning, from the purchase order-based planning to the consumption-based planning, moving from the budget planning to the proper supply chain planning. This is one of the important elements. And the second one that is very important, also related to to the new approach to the planning is what you see here defined as the rolling demand plan. So when we think in terms of budget, we tend to think, okay, we are going to plan from January to December, or if we are in peacekeeping budget, we are planning from July to June. No? So we are only doing this annual planning. But with the supply chain planning tool, what we want also to emphasize there is that the idea is that we will be planned for next 24 months, regardless of when the budget cycle is. We will always look at the next 24 months. So if we are now in June or starting July, we will look and we will prepare the plan for next 24 months. And then after 1 month, we will still keep for the next 24 months. So it's kind of similar to what happens when you are driving, right? That your lights are looking ahead of you, let's say 24 meters. Okay, so it doesn't matter in what month you are, you will always have a plan for next 24 months. Okay, so it is not constrained by the particular financial or budget cycle. We will always have a plan ahead of us for the next 24 months. Okay, I see there is a hand up, Brian from Syed, so maybe we can give him the floor.
Yes, sure thing. Syed, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you so much. I just wanted to know if we can go with the questions on the go, or is there any specific time frame you would want us to ask questions?
Yeah, I think. I mean, if there is, you can also write it in the chat. So Brian will, or whoever's monitoring will assess.
Okay, sure.
If it works.
Sure. So while we are at it, can we please go back to the previous slide?
Yes.
And there, I wanted to see in the current one.
Yeah.
One slide back, please. Yeah, here today. There is some link with the budget planning, but tomorrow I don't see any link with the budget planning. What is the idea there? And is it anywhere linked with the budget or not? Thank you.
Yeah, it will be linked with the budget. And of course, that's very important. But the difference now is that at the moment when we are preparing the supply chain or the acquisition plan, right, it's driven by the budget. So we know that we have to present the budget requirements for next year, and then we start thinking what we need to acquire. Now, with the supply chain planning tool, the concept will be different. We will know, we will plan what is needed to run our operations for next 24 months, and then when the budget formulation process approaches, we'll take the portion of our supply chain plan, of our demand plan, that goes to budget. So yes, there will be integration with budget, but we will first prepare our plan in terms of what we need to run of our operations, what we need to acquire for next 24 months, okay? And also the sourcing process will go there, and then we will formulate the budget. So initially, when we formulate the gross demand and the net demand that we will explain following, it will be unconstrained, meaning that the initial estimations of what we need to run our operations will be unconstrained. We will not be thinking in terms of budget. Then we will have a plan for next 24 months. Okay, it doesn't really matter in what month we are. So there will be a moment that we will need to prepare also the budget for next budget cycle, let's say. So then the system or the solution will integrate with budget formulation process, taking the portion of the plan that aligns with the budget cycle. Okay, so in our case, it's a rolling plan. We will always have a plan 24 months ahead of us, and then it will go to budget. Okay, thank you very much for the question. So in general, for questions, as I said, if you can write them on the chat, and then we will assess if we stop the flow or we'll answer that at the end of every block. So to do that, to be able to bring these benefits, so we have the supply chain planning tool, and this is a kind of summary of what is bringing the supply chain planning tool for your information, and then we will start really going into the processes. So for example, with the supply chain planning tool, it will allow a monthly planning process. So we'll have 24 months ahead of us, but then we can have a monthly review of the process that will also be advancing 1 month in the plan. This is the supply chain planning tool allows forecasting or predictive demand of goods and services, okay, that will require for operation. It will also generate automatically the
sharing. Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you. Sorry, because I stopped sharing. Okay, so this is a slide that summarizes more or less what what supply chain planning tool could bring in general terms. Okay, so on one hand, we say for goods and services, it will allow us to plan or predict, or it will help us to plan or predict our demand in the next 24 months. Based on this gross demand, this concept we will introduce them in a few seconds. It will automatically generate net demand. As he was asking, net demand will fit into budget. Okay, so we start from unconstrained demand, and then once the budget is approved, we will have constrained demand to, let's say, fit into what budget is approved. And then it will help to keep in balance in terms of inventory level. This is more a portion of the net demand. And then the main purpose, of course, of the supply chain planning tool is trying to ensure that products can be delivered in time and satisfying customer requirements. So that's why we say we focus on the supply chain management and not on what we need to acquire. Okay, and then of course there is management of exceptions. So all this to say, okay, that with the supply chain planning tool we will introduce, and it will help us to formulate demand planning that has these 3 steps that you see. We'll go through them in the presentation. First one is called gross demand formulation, and the gross demand itself is the total amount of goods and services that are required to operate an entity. So we are not talking about what we need to buy. We're talking about what we need to consume, what goods need to consume, what services we need to be receiving, what equipment needs to be acquired or replaced, right? And if there is any project that is important, what is required for that project. All right, so gross demand, this blue, let's say arrow, if I may say that, it is identifying what it's required in terms of goods and services to run our operations in an entity, okay, to operate an entity. Very important for some of your entities, this could be a new concept. While the net demand, which is the second one that you see in orange, is from what is, let's say, required, all right, from what is required to operate an entity, what portion needs to be acquired, okay? Because sometimes you may require to consume something, but you have it in stock, and maybe you have enough stock, and then you don't need to replenish. So gross demand is what really it's required to run the operation, to be consumed, for example, to be received, and net demand is what needs to be acquired. So in the supply chain planning tool, you will see we'll refer to gross demand very often. We'll refer to net demand, or we will refer to the source plan. Because source plan is actually, once we know what needs to be acquired, from where we're going to get it, from what contract, from internal sources or external sources. We're going to get it from a strategic deployment stock. We're going to get it from a system contract. So how are we going to source that? Okay, I believe this is a good moment to stop and make sure that this slide is clear for everybody, because it's the supply chain, let's say, planning tool end-to-end process, no? And then during the presentation or during the session today, we'll touch these 3 blocks: gross demand formulation, net demand, and source plan. Is it clear the difference between these 3 elements, among these 3 elements? Because I believe some of the entities in the past, we were actually doing directly acquisition planning. So maybe this concept of gross demand could be new to some of the entities. Is this clear, the distinction between gross demand, net demand, and source plan? If it's clear, please give me a thumb up or answer in the chat. If you have any question, that is also a good moment. Or if you want me to repeat, to clarify, please let us know, because it's actually essential not to get lost during the rest of the presentation. Is it fine if you can please give me some feedback? Maybe, or if you have a question, otherwise I'll need to stop here for a moment. So I'll give you a few seconds. Thank you, Stephen. Okay, Andre is saying the difference, okay, is the inventory. We'll touch that. The inventory has an impact on that. It's not only the inventory. Okay, it may be that you may have already open POs, for example, if you're talking about services. And so it is, the difference actually, some things is what you need, in other cases what you need to acquire. Yeah, inventory is very important in that sense. So yes, does it mean that there is a link between a warehouse module and some kind of or this is an estimate gross demand, net demand on channel side. So actually what we will see is that on net demand, yeah, there is connection with inventory management and warehouse management. Okay, actually it's connected with inventory. And yeah, there will be visibility on the net demand side. Okay, Xavier has a question. Is gross demand linked to any previous consumption? Actually, yes, Xavier. For the gross demand, and this is what we are going to explain from now on. We will analyze how gross demand is, let's say, planned in terms of from the system perspective, and then we'll go to the demand. Yes, gross demand. In the gross demand portion of the solution, we will be analyzing what was consumed in the past. Okay, so for that portion of the demand that can be predicted based on past consumption, the system will do it automatically for us. And for other part of the demand, it cannot be forecasted because it's based on a plan, simply like projects, for example, then we will enter it manually. Okay, but I think it makes sense for the type of questions. I think this part is clear. So now if I will go to gross demand, we'll go through some slide on gross demand, we'll go through net demand, and then we'll see source plan. All right, thank you. Services are measured in USD. Yeah. Okay, so when we talk about gross demand, all right, we have to distinguish three components. The gross demand plan for next 24 months, it will have three components. First component is a statistical forecast that will be a prediction of the system based on our previous 2 years of consumption. So the system, you will see now, the system will do some statistical analysis and will propose a forecast using mathematical methods. Then you have another component that is called entity priority project demand. It's very important for you as your senior demand planner or supply chain manager. And it's the demand that is not based on previous consumption, but is based on our particular project plan. And then for other products that were never consumed before, for example, they will go to additional demand. Okay? But these three elements are in the gross demand. It's not that you're going to be acting in all of them, but it's good that you understand them, because at the end of the process, you'll play a role. So what you will see in this slide is a kind of end-to-end process of the gross demand. Okay? Yeah, Ali, we will get into that when we touch the net demand portion. Okay, so don't worry. Now for the next 10-15 minutes, we will focus on gross demand. Okay, gross demand formulation, it's very important, and you will see where do you play a role. But even for the steps that you are not involved, it's important for you to understand how they happen, because you are also at the end of the process. So gross demand planning process itself starts from a review of the historical consumption data and historical consumption data. So the system will get historical consumption data from Umoja ECC, and then the local demand planner will review it. And after that, the system will do automatically data classification. So we'll analyze how the consumption happened in the past. We'll try to find consumption patterns, and we'll classify this consumption as continuous, with seasonality, intermittent, and so on. And then we'll perform some data cleansing itself automatically until it does what we call the statistical forecast. Okay, and these processes will be done automatically. So data classification, data cleansing, and statistical forecast will be done automatically. Another process that the system will do to help the planning process is what we call product segmentation, that we will explain in a few minutes as well. Then, apart from the statistical forecast that I'm highlighting here, there will be two other components of the gross demand. One is the entity priority project. Another one is what we said, additional demand. Okay, so now we will go through this. We'll explain briefly what we mean by these steps. Now, looking at who will do that, the first one will be done by this orange user icon. We will explain later what are the roles, but this orange user icon is a local demand planner. All right, we are training in a separate training that is for more than 1 week. It's local demand planners, and then the system automatically will do data classification, data cleansing, product segmentation, and statistical forecast. It's true that the local demand planner has the capability to review this this automatic process, and it can override based on his professional judgment or his planning intelligence, if I may say. But you see, on the statistical forecast process, there is first the manual step, which is review of historical consumption. But historical consumption will be coming from ECC, from Umoja. Then on the project side, on the demand related to project, we will have two user roles involved, the local demand planner and this blue user, that if you are senior demand planner, you have to keep an eye on that, even though we will explain during the session. But wherever you see the blue, this blue icon, user icon, pay attention because it's for senior demand planner. All right. Then also the local demand planner will prepare additional demand, and at the end of the process, we will have again the blue and the gray user icon. Blue is senior demand planner, the gray is the supply chain manager. All right, of course, don't worry, we will be explaining this in detail in the next minutes. But this could be kind of a summary of how gross demand is formulated. And now we will go step by step, explaining a bit more of the details of this process. All right, this is to formulate gross demand. So the first one, as you can see here, is historical data review. So what happened in that process? That is, let's say, done by the local demand planner, even though all the data is extracted from Umoja. So the system, all right, will get from Umoja production, from ECC data, all the consumption history for all the products that we have in the entity, for both goods and service. And then the local demand planner will review this consumption, and if it's needed, will perform adjustments in the supply chain planning tool, trying to make the consumption data reflect reality. So why we say adjustment if needed, if that data is coming from production? Because we may have the scenarios where service entry sheet have been posted late to cover consumption for the last 3-4 months, for example, or we may have other transactions that are not posted on time and correctly and managed, and then we may need to have the local demand planner reviewing that. What is the main purpose of historical data review? Why there is historical data review? Because we want consumption data reflecting reality. Okay, so if, for example, consumption of water happens in a continuous base, but the way we are managing our inventory, we're issuing them in advance for the next 2-3 months, we want the consumption data to reflect that it's constant, right? Or it's continuous in terms of consumption. So that's why the local demand planner has an important role there to keep to review consumption, and if there is if it's needed, to perform adjustments. Okay, because this consumption history will serve as a baseline for the forecast. Okay. Now, once we have this review, it will be like the final consumption history. Okay, and then I want to clarify as well what we understand by consumption history, because we say the local demand planner is reviewing consumption history. So what data we're getting from Umoja ECC? We have, on one hand, if your entities are managing inventory in Umoja, in Umoja, in ECC, you will have information coming from good issuance from inventory. So when items are issued out of inventory, they will be considered as consumed, and that will be tracked as consumption history. But also, if there are good receipts, not order for inventory, so let's say purchase orders for consumption directly, when the good receipt is processed, it will also be considered as consumed. Now, if you don't have inventory in Umoja in your entity, then you'll have mainly this scenario, right? Everything that when it's received, it would be considered as consumed, and then review of consumption history would be important. If most of your items are acquired as direct material, no, if this rings a bell, they are acquired for inventory, then the process of issuing out items of inventory is what will trigger the consumption concept, as it happens in finance. In finance, it's the same. When we issued out we recognize the expense of this site. And then in the case of services, of course, it's based on service entry sheet. So the system will analyze or will gather these three types of transactions and will bring them to the supply chain planning tool as consumption history. Okay. Now, okay, this is a slide of why we are adjusting that. So I already mentioned, you have it here for your reference. But typical, let's say the most typical scenario to have a review of consumption history, it could be this incorrect posting date. Okay, this is the most common scenario. All right, so this was about historical data consumption. Now let me go quickly through the automatic process that the system will do so you get an idea of what is happening. Okay, historical data will review. Now we'll focus on data classification that, as I said, is also automatically done by the system. So what happened in this data classification process is this automatic process, as I said. So the system will review the consumption history of the last 24 months, all right? Will perform a statistical analysis on that final consumption history, right? The one that was reviewed, and will classify the time series based on the nature of this consumption pattern. So it's called time series classification, but it's actually identifying consumption patterns for the last 24 months, and will classify this consumption as continuous or continuous with seasonality or continuous with certain trend, right? Upwards or downward, doesn't matter. Or it can be also classified as intermittent with seasonality. Okay, so there is a statistical analysis, and the system is doing that automatically for us. So that is, I believe, a strong improvement. No, we will get consumption history system will analyze it for all products, okay, for all entities, and then we'll use it as a base for the forecast. After that data classification, there is another step, okay, that is called data cleansing. The system is basically preparing and normalizing the data to be able to prepare the forecast. It is very mathematical, purely process, okay. And then it will continue with the next one that I believe is product segmentation. Okay, so what is product segmentation? Another automatic process that is done by the system to help us preparing our supply chain plan, our demand plan, actually, automatically done by the system as well. And why is this relevant? Because, you know, and particularly you might be involved on the demand plan for a long list of products, no, or for a big group of products or commodities. So from where to start? So the system, analyzing consumption history, again, will compare consumption within every group of products, and will be segmenting them as A, B, or C. So why is happening that? Why we are doing that? Because as we know, not all goods and services have the same characteristics. No, sometimes they have their own particularities. Some products are very expensive, and that's why they are very important for the plan process. Some other products are not very expensive, but they are massively consumed, and they are very important also in the demand. And then not all of them are as easy as predict as the other. So every product has its own nature. And then when we want to start the plan, we would like to also prioritize, right, to give the higher value possible to our planning process. So demand for some products, as we know in the entity, should be forecasted and prioritized. Okay, and based on several factors, as I said, some of them are very expensive, some of them are massively consumed, some of them are critical or strategic for our organization. And the goal of this process, product segmentation, is to help us prioritize. Why what the system is doing that at this moment? Because it will also help us to review forecast. It will also help us to review our demand. So the point of the segmentation is to prioritize products, okay, to make distinctions between different products based on their relative importance within a plant. Okay, when you see plant here, you can read entity. Plant is the technical terminology to identify it. Okay, so what the system will do essentially in the segmentation will be based on the consumption value of the products, they will be classified either as A, as B, or as C within a commodity of product, within a group of products. So in that way, local demand planner, but also you can focus on prioritize on A products, because if you focus on them, I believe at least 70% of the demand value will be considered by this A product. And the system is doing that automatically and will also be shown in the tool very easily with the column that contains the data. This is ABC segmentation. So I see there is one comment in the same context. Can you please share the methodology behind all automated classification or categorization processes? Yes, of course, we can share all that. In this session of overview, considering that we are covering in this training in 4 hours the content that is more relevant to you, but if we put together gross demand training and net demand training, we have more than 2 weeks of training with 4 or 5 hours a day. Okay, so yes, we have all this content. We can share with you more details. The purpose of this presentation at the moment is to give you an overview. And then, of course, if you are interested in more details, we will share the material. And also you will receive, a user guide will be published very soon with all the details. Okay, local demand planners are getting all these details, actually, in the training. So product segmentation, as we said, get the idea, try to keep the idea from all the products within a particular commodity. No, let's say we talk about paper, there might be different type of paper. So the system says this paper A4 white, okay, is classified as A. So when you are going to prepare your plan, make sure that you are planning properly for that product. And this is ABC segmentation. There is another type of segmentation of products that is called XYZ. Okay, this other product segmentation is very similar idea. We'll take the product, we'll segment them, we'll group them by X, Y, Z. But this would be measuring the volatility of their demand. So if we have products whose demand is more or less constant, they are very easy to predict. No, if we know like the flat rate of internet services is always the same, it's maybe $100 or $200 monthly, right? We know it will continue in that way. They will be very easy to be predicted and they will be classified as X. But if there is other demand that is intermittent, or there are strong variation, or is a bit chaotic and it's difficult to predict, the system will classify it as Y or Z. Why we are doing that? Because the system is also performing a statistical analysis on the variations of the demand to say, all right, we're in good conditions to forecast this one, or this one is more difficult to forecast. Maybe for the ones that are difficult to forecast, is worth applying your planning intelligence, no, and then take more cautiously the forecast from the system. Another type of segmentation, another feature, the supply chain planning tool, automatically done. So you have products will be classified as A, B, or C, depending on their importance, and also X, Y, Z, depending on the volatility of their demand. All right, so continuing with this process, I just mentioned briefly what is historical data, right? Review, then we have system classifying the statistical, classifying the time series, the consumption in the past. Then we have the automatic data cleansing, product segmentation to say what products should be prioritized. And then we have a statistical forecast, which is the system performing mathematical projections of the consumption, the previous consumption, to try to predict the future, right? And there are a couple of algorithms that are quite complex to explain, let's say. And then in your entity, you may also have someone that is more involved in the advanced forecasting that could be there, involved in fine-tuning this algorithm. But this is done automatically by the system. So now I'm going to mention briefly again what we mean by a statistical forecasting process. Okay, again, this is automatic. And I think what you should know, or at least keep in mind when talking about this thing, is that the statistical forecast, okay, is a process that is making predictions based on the analysis of the trends. So meaning if our historical consumption review, it's a solid process, and the consumption history that we have reflects the reality in the past, the system will analyze that and will try to project that into the future, into the next 24 months. All right, so the statistical forecast then allows you to predict to a certain extent the future demand of a product or a group of products. Right, this is the idea. Of course, not all product consumption can be forecasted, no? For example, or not all the forecasts in the future can be predicted based on previous consumption, no? All right, so the scope of the statistical forecast, of course, it fits what can be forecasted. For other type of demand that cannot be forecasted based on consumption, historical consumption, we have these other two elements that we will explain. All right, so yeah, basically, I think you got the idea more or less. So we look at the past, we analyze the past, and the system is projecting future consumption. All right, this is let's say regarding this branch that you see on the right, whose output is the statistical forecast. This is one of the main elements of the gross demand. But then we have two other that are actually very important for you as a senior demand planner or supply chain manager. The first one, I mean, apart from the statistical forecast, we have here what we call entity priority project, and I believe this is what we're going to cover now. Okay, important here you see the blue user icon because you are involved in that process, and the orange, which is the local demand plan. All right, so let's talk now a bit about the entity priority project, and because the senior demand planner is involved here, we'll have also demonstration with Brian after the break. Okay, so this part of explanation will be completed by Brian, showing to you how we proceed in the system. But first of all, we need to clarify what is an entity priority project. So, because we know the entities have different projects that are very diverse in terms of size or nature, right? Or even requirements. Some of these projects, based on the importance of the project for the entity, some of the project would be classified as priority. And this is, of course, determined by the entity. Maybe it's even determined by you, right? By the senior demand planners or the supply chain managers. Now, for this product, for these projects that are classified as entity priority project, all right, recording of all products in terms of also demand, it's required. So for important projects, the planning of the demand is very important, of course. So how is the process going to work in the supply chain planning tool? We'll have 3 steps here to track this. Of course, this is not automatic, no, like the statistical forecast. This one we have involvement of the users. So we have 3 steps here. The first one, and it's important to you because it's done by the senior demand planner, is the creation of the EPP, no, Entity Priority Project. This is the acronym, and Entity Priority Project header, which is simply specifying what is the project, what is its title, its start date and end date, and general information of the project. This is what actually Brian is going to show in the system later. I mean, I think Brian will show the full end-to-end, but we will try to focus on your part. Then after the senior demand planner has entered the project, no, has like listed the projects that we have in the entity, then local demand planner will be adding products, either goods or services that are required for this project, and also will specify quantities and when they are required. Okay, so this is, let's say, the end-to-end of the entity priority project, one of the important elements that you also saw in the agenda. And the first portion is done by the senior demand plan. You will see it is not a very long process, right? And then I think in terms of data input, this part here of the local demand plan is a bit more time consuming, all right? But at the end, it's only specifying what is needed for the project. That is actually that we also need to do if we are requesting additional funding for that. The difference here is that we are specifying when certain quantities are required, and this will also help us later for the net demand and the source plan process. You know, when we need to order what and so on. All right, this was about the entity priority project. And then, as I said, the gross demand is composed by a statistical forecast, entity priority project, and additional demand. So now we are going to explain what we mean by additional demand. Even though you will not be the ones entering this additional demand, it's important that you understand why it's there, because you can eventually adjust the final gross demand. So why do we add additional demand? Because not all the demand can be predicted based on the past consumption. Not all demand comes from the entity priority project. So not all demand is project-based. So what happened with the rest of the demand if there is a particular requirement that is needed and we know it, so we need to increase the demand for certain items, we will add it as additional demand. Or if there is an unexpected situation or not predictable situation where we need to add some extra demand, we will add it as additional demand. Or if there is a product or service that was never acquired before and we need to include it, we will put it here as additional demand. All right. So what we enter in additional demand, we enter sudden demand changes. All right, due to, for example, unexpected events, product without any historical data as well could be added as additional demand. And very important that I didn't mention before, equipment related demand, right? Because for equipment, we know demand is not based on what we acquired last year, right? If we bought last year 50 laptops, it doesn't mean that this year we're going to acquire another 50 laptops, right? It would depend on how old are the laptops in the entity, for example, or if they got broken for some reason, or how often vehicles get in repair in our entity, or how often UPSs get completely unuseful and need to be replaced. So for equipment, it's a bit different. So we'll not get that from the statistical forecast, but will be added as additional. All right. So when we talk about equipment, right, and we said equipment items or fixed assets, they are not the type of items that we will predict based on when they were issued out of inventory, for example. But there is some information that the solution, the supply chain plan will bring to the local demand planners, like how many equipments of what type are nearing the end of the useful life, for example. And this will give us the base to understand what equipment items need to be replaced. This is also something that is brought to the supply chain planning tool. And also we'll get information on the write-off history, how many write-off cases of these products we had in the last 12 months, or how many items we had in repair in the last 12 months. And all this will help the local demand planner to formulate its replacement plan, if I may say, and correspond accordingly the additional demand. Okay, so these are the elements that we capture in the gross demand through these three processes. We have entity priority project, we have additional demand, and then we have a statistical forecast, and all this goes to gross demand. What happens when the gross demand, let's say, is ready? Then it goes to senior demand, local planner, right? Senior demand planner, and the supply chain manager. Okay, so if you are supply chain manager in the supply chain planning tool, or you're getting the function of the senior demand planner, you are at the end of the process reviewing the gross demand. Now we will explain in general terms how this happens, and we will show it in the demo later. So finalization of the gross demand, which involving the senior demand planner and the local supply chain manager. So as we said before, based on the statistics, we have the statistical forecast is one of the components of the gross demand. We have the entity priority project demand, I'm highlighting now in yellow, and additional demand, not any other demand. all this goes as a gross demand, and then first the local demand planner can review to make sure it's fine, and then senior demand planner and supply chain manager can review that gross demand and adjust. Okay, very important that consider that this adjustment of the gross demand is only given to senior demand planner, because this is kind of skipping the full process. So it is not really recommended for local demand planner to use it to adjust the demand, because local demand planner should act overriding the forecast if they don't agree, increasing the additional demand if it's needed, or modifying the plan for the project. But you as a senior demand planner have the capability to review, and based on more senior analysis or in general considerations, you could increase or decrease, so you could override the gross demand. Okay, gross demand will be formulated in quantity for goods, okay, for materials. And then here, as you see here in green, another process also automatically done by the system. The system will dollarize this gross demand quantity, will convert that to dollar value, to gross demand value in dollars, using a dollarization process that we will explain later. But basically, the system will take as a reference contract unit price, last PO unit price. We'll try to find unit prices to convert that into dollar value. Okay, dollarization process, we'll explain that later in a few moments. Once the gross demand is final, once the gross demand is okay and that's been reviewed by you, then system will be able to take a snapshot of the plan, and we will be able to compare our plan in the future if it changes. So there is also a snapshot functionality, another automatic process. Okay, it's a lot of automatic process. I think it's important that you understand what they do and how you can benefit from them and why they are there. All right, so you will be reviewing and adjusting this. We will have a demonstration on how to adjust gross demand. You will see it's very, very simple. I mean, it's simple in terms of steps in the process, but I believe it should be very, very difficult is to estimate the variation of the gross demand if you need to adjust. When it comes to, I think, dollarization, right, this is another of the roles that are invited to this training, the price planner. So we'll explain how it works. It is automatic process, but the price planner has an important role there because it will be the person responsible of checking the different unit prices that we have. So how does this dollarization process goes? No, once we have gross demand, we mean, okay, for the next 24 months, we're going to need this quantity of these goods. So the system will retrieve from Umoja ECC the contract price of the items that we have, the purchase order price, and if it's inventory, managing inventory, will also get the moving average price from it. But the price planner, okay, this user in red can also maintain what we call the fair market value. Okay, the fair market value is here. So the system will take all these unit prices by order of priority and will multiply the unit price by the quantity that we are requiring. So if there is a fair market value that was entered by the price planner, the system will multiply quantity, considering unit of measure, of course, by the fair market value, and then we will have the dollar value of the gross demand. Okay. If there is no fair market value, the system will take the next one in the list. No, will take contract unit price to dollarize the demand, to convert, to get the gross demand value. If the contract price is not there, then we'll take the last purchase order price. And if it's not there, we'll try to get moving average price. Okay, so this is how the system will convert the gross demand that we have in quantity, so what is required to run operations, into dollar value and estimation of the dollar value that this means. I need to make a very important point here. We are saying all the time, the supply chain planning tool, everything applies to goods and services, all right? But there is one constraint that we have to keep in mind. Ideally, gross demand should be perform analyzing quantities, right? We need to know how many hours of services we need, how many bottles of water we need, how many items we need to acquire, etc. But because of the quality of the data in the system in Moja ACC, it is really a challenge when it comes to services, right? To get the proper quantities that were consumed in the past and the proper unit prices. Because we have different scenarios with services when they were not tracked properly, like unit price was one and the quantity was the total amount of the PO. We have scenarios where the price and the quantity were swapped. I mean, we have different situations with the service entry sheets and the purchase order for services that don't allow yet to manage all services in quantity. So for the time being, until the problem of the different type of services is solved, in the supply chain planning tool, we will always get demand for goods will come in quantity and then will be transformed into dollar value. But most of the service demand, with the exception of fuel that is coming from a different system, right? EFMS, I think, for majority of services, they will be managed in dollar value for the time, which means that gross demand, consumption history, and gross demand forecast will already be given to us in dollar value. Okay, important point. And then, of course, if it's come for services, the demand is coming in dollar value, will not need to dollarize, right? This applies to most of the services with the exception of fuel, but hopefully this will change in the future as review of these contracts for services and so on are fixed. Okay. This is about dollarization. Remember, gross demand for goods comes in quantity. We need to transform it to dollar value. Examples of multiple sources. Yes, of course. These are the multiple sources. So when it comes for, let me continue with the example of the bottle of water or pens, for example. If we are preparing our gross demand and we are considering how many bottles of water need to be acquired, okay, we may have bottles of water that were acquired through contract in the past, right? There are different contracts. There might be local contract. It could be a release contract now. There might be some expired contracts. So the system, all right, in terms of contract, analyze also multiple sources, will review contract unit price for the bottle of water, right, in SRM, and we'll calculate, we'll get the contract unit price. And this will be coming here what I'm just highlighting now. But also the supply chain planning tool will look into the last purchase order for bottles of water, and we'll get another unit price from another source. That's why we say multiple sources. But also if you manage inventory in Moja, you may have bottles of water that were in your stock in the past. So in inventory, we also have what is called moving average price. This is MAP, is moving average price. That's another source of unit price. So system will get it from multiple sources, but then we'll give priority to the one that you see here in this order. So another source, right? Another source of the unit price would be what the price planner enters. So the system gets prices from multiple sources, and then the one that takes us final unit price would be fair market value if it's there. If not, we'll take it from the contract, okay, from the active contract. If not, we'll take it from PO, from the purchase order, the last purchase order. So that's why what we meant by multiple sources. I hope it's clear. And this is, of course, an automatic process as well. All right. So, okay. So that's what we wanted to explain about gross demand. So I believe, let me stop here for a moment to see if you have any question. All right, about this thing. And I believe we're going to have to make a short break before we go to net demand. Otherwise, it's going to be too much content in one shot. So is it more or less clear? At least you need to get an idea of these two slides. Let me summarize for a moment. So you need to have an idea of this slide right? That we say the supply chain planning tool end-to-end starts from gross demand, net demand, and source plan. And then as a summary of the gross demand, you should remember that it has three components: a statistical forecast, entity priority, project, and additional demand. And this is a summary of the end-to-end process of the gross demand formulation. Right, you have these three elements: historical data review that is done by the local demand planner. All right, and then it goes all the way to the statistical forecast. And then we have entity priority, project demand, so it's based on projects. And we have additional demand for the rest. And at the end, we will finalize gross demand and adjust it if needed. Okay, senior demand planner, it's involved here, entering the project header, or I mean the main description of the project, and here reviewing the final gross demand. Now, I know I talked too much for 1 hour without stopping. Thank you for listening. And is there any question that you have about this process? I know it's still a quite vague idea, but if you have any question or if you want me to clarify, I believe you should be able to, when you see these steps, you should have already an idea of what happens where. But if you see any of these elements that you want me to clarify, right, particularly, for example, these ones that I'm highlighting, let me know. Otherwise, please also give me a thumb up for something that I see that you're more comfortable, and we can break at least for 5 minutes. Brian, is there any question or any hand? I don't see that.
David, besides what you have already seen in the chat, there's nothing new. Just questions on how the formulas work for some of the slides that you were showing, automatic processes especially, but no hands raised.
Okay, yeah, we'll explain very briefly one of the formulas on the how we formulate net demand. For the other, we can share reference material. So please, is this clear? Do you have an idea? I know you are all very busy colleagues, but I hope when you look at this slide, you don't feel lost. So please give us some feedback and then we can go on break. Look at this slide. Let me know if you feel more or less comfortable with the general idea of how we formulate this gross demand. And remember, gross demand is the goods and services that are required to operate the end. Okay, I see no reaction, so I don't know if you're following the session or not, but I assume that if you don't have any comment, it should be okay on your end. Okay. All right, thank you. So Brian, let's have a small break, right? So I will take this silence as a symptom that it was too much talking. So let's stop for 5 minutes. If you can maybe set up a timer on your end, Brian.
Sure thing, David. I'll set it up for 6 minutes. We found that 6 minutes is perfect. 5
okay. 5 is too short. Yeah, that means makes a difference, of course.
So let me just share my screen.
Okay.
Sure, we count them. All right.
So see you in 5 minutes. In 6 minutes, actually. Okay. Thank you, Ryan. Okay. The break time is over. So I hope you are still with us. So I see 55 people connected. So that's a lot. I see a hand up. So maybe we have one question before we okay. I think maybe the hand was to say that you are here with us. So thank you for letting me know. And let's continue with the season. What we have explained so far is let's say we gave an overview of what is the gross demand process, right? And you may have one of these three roles. You might be senior demand planner, you could be supply chain manager, you could be price planner. So before getting into the net demand, actually, I believe it's worth showing the system. No, we will show to you a bit how the system looks and we will perform a demonstration of what are your actions in the system. Hopefully, it will be interesting for you to see how to access the tool, what to open, and then the demonstration will be recorded. So now we will proceed with some demonstrations that if I share my screen again, just to identify what we are going to explain. So, and then maybe Brian can confirm if you see my screen.
Yes, we do.
So we will start with the demos because the statistical forecast starts from the historical consumption and then it's all automatic. We will not show that, but we will have now a demonstration performed by Brian on the entity priority project portion, right? And then particularly pay attention to the part that need to be done by you, okay? So over to you, Brian, and then we will continue later with dollarization, right? And I will get ready for gross demand adjustments. Okay, over to you, Brian.
All right, thank you, David. So let's dive into the system and let's take a quick look at first how we would log in. Actually, I'm logged in already, but just so you have an idea, the login is as we're used to already. We log into Umoja, and once we have already provided our Unite credentials, we would simply access, and again, this is in the training environment, of course, the utilities folder that we have here. And once we have access to the utilities folder, we would simply click on the IBP development icon. Now, once we click on that and we launch Citrix, Citrix will ask us once again to identify ourselves using our Unite ID and password. We'll get our code that we're already familiar with, and then Citrix will launch the application, which looks like this. Okay, so you basically have an Excel that you're all familiar with. I think you can see my screen clearly. And the tab that is important to us in this Excel is the one called SAP IBP, the one I'm currently on. Once you're on this tab, you'll have access to the icons that will allow the local planners to access the templates that David has been displaying, the historical data template, automatic cleansing, statistical forecast, and so on. I'm only going to show you this quickly, as this is not something you would be doing as the senior demand planners, but still, so you have an idea, the local planners would access the new view icon. And once they click on this icon, they would have access from the pop-up window to all the templates from this drop-down here at the top. Historical data, auto-cleansing, forecast, segmentation, EPP, equipment, gross demand, dollarization, and the snapshot. These are all templates that we've been already showing all the local planners in past gross demand trainings, how to access them, how to work with the timeframes, attributes, key figures for each of the templates, the layout, and most importantly, the filters to get the information that they require. Now, I'm not going to go into these templates because this is not part of the training that we're delivering to you, but I did want to show you at least what the local planners would be looking at and how they would be accessing and setting up each one of these templates when accessing the supply chain planning tool. All right, I'm going to close this window, and now I will dive into the master data workbook, which is this icon I'm hovering over right now. And that's the one that is important for us as senior demand planners when we're going to create our EPP header. So as David was explaining, when we're dealing with projects that of course we'll be planning and discussing offline, that's where we're going to decide what project we're creating, the time frame, the details of this project, and then we would jump into the system to basically create what we call the header or the template for this project. To do so, we simply click on the master data workbook icon here, and another pop-up window will load. That will be separated into two different sections. One here up top that's already checked, which is the common filter. Now that becomes important when you're loading templates that require you filtering information. So for example, if you wanted to see all the products and services that are available in the master data workbook, the filter would become very important for you when you want to, let's say, filter by a specific product ID, commodity, or any other attribute that you see here available. Okay, we're not going to be using the filter option right now because what we're going to dive into directly is our master data section, the one right below, and we're going to be selecting the master data type from the dropdown that is related to our entity priority project or EPP header, which is the one we see right here, entity priority project header. Now, once you click on the header, you see already that the system is previewing that the template that you're about to load will have one single tab called the Entity Priority Project Header, and you'll also have an option here to check the edit box. Now, if you're creating the header for the first time, you should always select or check the edit box. Okay, if you leave it unchecked, you'll be able to view the projects, but you won't be able to add more information to this template. Now, once you click on the edit checkbox and you have selected your entity priority project header, you simply click on OK to load this template. And we'll see what this looks like in a second. It shouldn't take too much to load. You'll see, as you can see on screen right now, that we have all the projects that have been created with their project type, their priority, their project beneficiary, project owning entity, EPP description, and also the start and end dates for the project that we're seeing here. We're seeing all the projects that we've created throughout our trainings. So you could always filter to the ones that relate to you if you've already created a header by simply clicking on the drop-down and then selecting one of the headers that you have created in the past. As you see, we have quite a number of them for every training that we have delivered. Or you can simply scroll down manually and look for the project that you're interested in maybe updating or editing. Now, if you're creating it from scratch, if this is the first time that you're accessing the master data workbook to create an EPP header, what you would do is simply scroll down to the bottom of this template, as we're doing now. And once you reach the sections here that are blank with no previous information, here's where you will start inputting the information for your project. Now, if I hadn't clicked on that checkbox for edit, we wouldn't have this orange looking column here, and we wouldn't be able to add any more information and then save it in the system. Since I clicked on that button, now we have this orange column that allows me to start adding my EPP project ID, which would be the name of the project. Okay, in this case, just for the sake of the training, we will give it a name that is easy to remember for us, because once you've added this EPP project header, the local planner would then have to know this name of the header, and then once adding the items, the product IDs, which are for the goods and services, would have to add this EPP header name once again in the next template that we're going to dive into. But first things first, we come here to the EPP header and we add the EPP project ID. In this case, I will call it David, and maybe we can say David Training. We always recommend that you don't add any spaces in between the wording, just because we've found some issues, at least in the training environment, when adding spaces, sometimes the system doesn't save it properly. So I would recommend to create your EPP project ID name without any spaces, like I've done here, David Training altogether. And once I have added the name, as you can see on the top, we only have 1, 2, and 3 cells that will be required to fill in to create the header. I have already completed my first one, David's Training, Then I would have to add the project type information. So whatever the project is linked to, is it healthcare? Is it construction? As you can see here, we have others that maybe we have added differently in the training, but I think the majority of the options that we've selected so far are basically healthcare and also construction. Now, these, of course, are names that we have to make sure that we spell correctly so that when we save the changes that we're adding to the master data workbook, to the EPP header, we don't get any errors when we're saving our data. So, for example, imagine we are creating a project that is linked to healthcare. We would simply add the information here. For example, like I'm adding here healthcare. The project priority column is only requiring us to add the letter I or the Roman symbol for 1, just because it's required by the system to track what we're doing, and so that when we save, it saves correctly. And then the other cells that we see are not required, but of course will be very good for us to know exactly who the project beneficiary is, which is the project owning entity in the EPP description. As we can see here, we can add probably the project beneficiary. In this case, as we've done for others, we could either add transport, entity, hosting country. In this case, I think I'm going to go with hosting country as well. And we can add the project owning entity. Maybe we can add here UNGSC, which is the one related to us. And we'll continue providing the EPP description information as we've done before for the vaccination campaign. Once we have already added the EPP description, the owning entity, beneficiary, we've added the Roman number 1 for the project priority, we've added the project type and the EPP project ID, all we would have to add is the duration of this project. Remember when David was explaining, the duration of a project can vary from 1 year up to 5 years. So now we're not talking about just the 24 months, but we can actually create a project in the system and give it a length of up to 5 years. So if, for example, I wanted to copy the information here, like the one on the top, I'm going to basically say that this project will last for 5 years. But what I'm going to do is say that it's going to start 1st of July instead of June. So here we have our dates. Project start will be 1st July 2021, and the end will be March 31st, 2025. Okay, so this is the information that you would require as a senior demand planner to add manually in the master data workbook for the EPP header. When David was showing you the slide of the requirements for the senior demand planner and was talking about the EPP header, this is what you would do in the system. And I can go over the steps once again if you need me to, but we basically just clicked on the master data workbook. We've selected our EPP header as a master data type, and then we manually added the name and all the other information required. We can scroll over to the right here on the project and see that there is nothing else for us to add. We don't also need to add the key partner either, as it's not a required field, but this is practically it. Quite simple. There's really no mystery or secret to adding the EPP header, as long as you make sure that you've added all the information correctly and that you remember your EPP project ID for when the local planner goes in to add the items, which we can show too. David, if you find it necessary, we can show that too. Now, before I move on to maybe saving the changes that I've made, I don't know, David, if you want to take a look if there's any questions or anything you would like me to show, repeat, or clarify. Right, David? Yeah. If you...
Hi, Brian. Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, there is actually a question, and I was checking with my email to give you the exact answer. Karen was asking, yeah, we just saved, Xavier, so Brian will click on Save Changes, right? Yeah. So there are several questions. Let me go in order. Now, first about how to proceed in the tool. No, it's a few questions. Brian, did you click on Save Changes already or not yet?
No, I haven't. No.
Okay, so yes, we just click on Save Changes and we'll save it. And I will show after that an alternative way of doing this that will give you also list of values, because, for example, for project types, you cannot enter there whatever you want. No, there is a list of values for project type. Yeah. So once you click on save changes, this is kind of saving on the database, and then later, different moment you can also edit. That's not a problem, right? So maybe Brian, you can show how to save.
Exactly. So when we save changes, we go to the Save Changes icon next to our master data workbook right up here. And once we click on it, the system will tell us now if there's any comments that we need to add before saving the changes that we've made. So any comments related to the project header that we've created. Here, project for data training. And once we save, you'll see what the system will tell us. It'll start analyzing if every information that we've added to the cells is accurate and it matches what should be there or what is part of our master data, and let us know if the number of change records has occurred, which is 1 here, and if there's actually a number of rejected records, which is 0. So if we had made any mistakes when adding the project type or any other piece of information like the date or so on, we would have a rejected record. The system would let us know that we can't proceed with saving these changes. It also gives us an option to download the full report of the changes that we have just made to the template or not. In this case, I'm going to select the download full report option. So you can see that when I click on OK, you'll have another Excel pop-up showing you if what you have just performed in the system has been done correctly or not. As you can see here, we have 0 rejection codes, and also the rejection description data import was, I think I just lost that. Okay. All right, David, I'm sorry, but I think I had just lost that Excel that loaded. Just give me 1 second. If I can find it now, here you go. Okay, so here we go. Data import of row was successful. Okay, so you know that the header that you've added to the EPP is fine and the data import was successful. And now that will be saved. Now, if there's any changes or if you've made any mistakes or you need to go back and make any changes to this header that you've just created, you can always do so even after you have saved it. So now this will be saved here, this David training, and I can exit the master data workbook, go somewhere else, close it, and then come back. And when I load it once again, you'll see that this is still there. And if we need to make any changes, we would simply go back to our master data workbook. We would once again select our entity priority project header from the dropdown, click on the edit checkbox, and once we load, we'll have once again the same information that we've had before, and our project will be there as well if we need to make any changes. If we do make any changes, just remember to always go back, save them, and then the system will let you know if you've done everything correctly.
Okay, there is a very good question from Bertina and another one from Rui. So Bertina says, do you have an example of rejected headers and how to correct it? Yeah, the most typical example of a rejected header is where the project type, right, is not correct, or maybe project priority is left empty. So maybe Brian, maybe we can just enter another letter there in healthcare and try to save the changes. So we show an example. And then I'll give you a tip as well, maybe when Brian is done, how to save that. Brian, I believe I'm not sure we're gonna have time to go through all the end-to-end processing on EPP. So maybe we'll focus on this one. Okay. So if you click on save now.
Use it to HealthCat and saving the changes, and I should receive an error now telling me that the changes I've made are incorrect. So once I save, I should have now a message saying that there is, see, number of rejected records, 1.
And then maybe you can click on download error report to show a typical error.
Okay, so here we go. Now we have our timestamp with the severity of the error that we've made, and also where it would be. For example, warning, master data import and foreign key check failed. All right, so I think this is the one David is letting you know that it's cross-referencing the data that you've entered in the EPP header with the master data that's in the system and telling you that there is a foreign key where something is not right with the master data that you've entered. Okay, everything else is just informative, but your warning error is right here. All right, David, so I think that's what I wanted to show.
Thank you, Brian, for that. Thank you, thank you. So Rui saying how many lines we have to populate. So the lines refer to projects only. So for every project, the senior demand planner will need to create one line. So one line represents the project. Then local demand planner will enter different lines in a different table for the products and services. But you, as a demand planner, senior demand planner, you only need to enter one. Okay, and actually, yeah, there was another question. Actually, Brian, maybe I can share only for 1 second.
Sure.
Yes, let me share 1 second. So the way of creating that is the one that Brian showed to you is like the most standard one, and then you may have multiple projects, so you may use it to enter all your projects. Now, Brian, I'm not sure if you can see my screen. Can you?
Yes, we can.
Okay. But also from the same place, Brian came here and click on create and selected the right table, right? But also from this area here, when you see manage, there is single, which is another way of you can use to modify or to create one, because this one we don't show it typically to local demand planners because they manage multiple records, but because you're going to be creating like the project header, this could be also useful. So instead of going through the table, I would go to the table if I have to enter all the projects at the beginning, right? But if you have to enter only one, maybe, as I'm saying, you can also, and this is recorded, so you can watch it several times. You can go just simply to manage, single, and then here you select the same table that Brian mentioned before. It's called Entity Priority Project Header. So here you have a different interface to create a new record. So you can put here the project ID, as Brian did. So this is my project. Okay. And you can click on add master data by adding new ID. Okay. So you can simply click on here and you will be able to populate that. All right. And then here, for example, because project type is does not accept any all the possible values, but there is a list of values, you can also click here to get the list. All right. So Brian was selecting healthcare, that is a valid one. So there are two ways. If you are more familiar with Excel and you want to have more freedom, or you already know what are the values that you can select there, you can do it. Or entity project priority, for example, can be either 1 or 2 at this moment. So that will also help you. All right, you have two ways. I believe if you're going to enter only 1 or 2, maybe it's worth doing it from here. Let me repeat. We go to manage, single, right? So we are going to enter only one line. So that's why for this example, I just remember that we had this suggestion as well. But the way that Brian explained is more standard. And then, for example, you can also go later there to see all the items that the local planner has included, etc. All right. So yeah, over to you, Brian. There was a question, a very good question about integration. And I was actually trying to confirm what answer we got from New York about that. So there will be integration points for EPP, and actually they have planned already integration between SPPM, right, where we have the budget formulation and the strategic framework, or for example, SMA, the strategy management application, where you may have already information for some projects, but it's not in place right now. No, this is part of the plan. Now, IPMR, I think, has not been scoped yet as a possible interface. Okay, but now we are implementing the solution by first time. Now the integration with other systems will come a bit later, and there is already a plan to integrate with SMA and SPPM. And we already raised a question about IPMR, I think it was 1 month ago. So yeah, that's the plan. Now let me see some other questions, Brian. So you see when we go to the system, people are more active. Okay. So Kong is asking, why don't we have a drop-down list of project types to prevent error-related data to input? Exactly, Kong, that is what I was explaining. If you see my screen again, that's why I was showing. And then sorry, Brian, that I didn't tell you I will show this. I just remember that this feature could be useful, but we never explained that before. So Kong, if you can see my screen, okay? If instead of using the table edition view that we show always as a standard, if you go to manage single, right? And we do the same thing, we are going to enter a project header. You will have a drop-down list, okay? So if I enter here another test, my project or my, actually it's not my project, not my entity, priority project. Okay, we enter the project ID and then we click on here, add master data. So we're going to enter a new project. You see there are 3 dots here on the right side. So for example, for project type, there is a drop down. It's not drop down, it's not dropping down, but it's popping up. But it gives you the list of values. So what project type can I select? This is training environment. In reality, you will have a longer list, no? So here I can select construction, or I can select environmental, or I can select healthcare. All right. So if I say construction, I will select it here. So yes, if you use this single way of entering project IDs, yeah, you have a list of values. All right, I hope that clarifies question. Okay, so let me see if there is, but thank you so much for asking questions. If you don't ask questions, then we cannot show it in the way you need. Now, Bertina is saying, yeah, the example of rejecting. Karen said, thank you. So there was, I think that's it, Brian. Huh? How many lines do I have to populate? The integration question. Yeah, I think that's it. So over to you, Brian. I think we're fine with that EPP explanation. Not sure if you want to show. Maybe you can show the view of the EPP template, right? Without getting into all the line items, so they see one of the projects how they will look, so we can close the loop in that way, and then we'll go to dollarization.
All right, sure thing. So if we wanted to see the finished process of the header and then the items added and what the local planner would go in to do in the actual template, in the EPP template, what we would do if we were local planners is go here to the new view. And once we click on this icon and select the template for EPP demand, remember as local planners, now, once that template is loaded, as we can see, it's already loaded here, the time has already changed, we would go down to the filter option and here searching for an attribute called EPP, not description, but EPP project ID, and selecting it, the planner would now be able to find, if everything has been done correctly, the project that was created in the product IDs, goods and services that were added to that project at a later stage by clicking on the matchbox here and searching for the project right here, okay? These are all the projects that have been created, the headers that were created, the items that were added, we have them all available here in the EPP template, okay, as the local planners. And I think if I select one of the very first ones that I have, I think right here, BBDTR, I know I created this one before, you would simply, as a local planner, check the box for that project. Once it becomes selected, you click on OK, and the planner would just simply load by clicking on OK, and you would see what that looks like as an EPP template in the supply chain planning tool. Now, once this EPP template is loaded, you should see the plant that this EPP is related to, the project description, the project ID, also the duration of it, and even the product IDs, which are goods and services that have been added to this project. You should see that in a few seconds. And now, as a local planner, I would jump in and add the quantities of these products that I would need for that specific project. So as you see right here, what I was saying, we know that for this particular plant, planning group, the planning group description, this EPP header was created for this project type with these product IDs that were added at a later stage. We didn't show you that process, but basically it works very similar to what we showed you. But since it's the job of the local planner, we didn't show you that. With the product type, its unit of measure, and the key figure, which is linked to the EPP demand template. Now here, what we would have, if we scroll to the right, is the amount of months in the future, at least 24 months in the future for this project, that we would be adding the required amount for each of these products month by month. So for example, if we need one oil machine in July, 20 drill dentals for July, the stethoscope maybe we'll need 10 for July as well, and the lamp UVs will need another 15. So we would, as local planners, add the amounts. We can do that once again for August if we believe we would require 10 more in August, or in September. We would simply add this information month by month, indicating how much we would need of each of these products. Okay, David, so this is exactly what it would look like once we're reaching the end of the process for the EPP demand template in the supply chain planning tool. Once the header is created, once the items are added, the planner goes back to the supply chain planning tool, loads the template for EPP, and simply provides the amount of those product IDs that will be needed month by month throughout the 5 years that we have created the projects for. All right, David, I'm not sure if you want me to go any further, but this is the final action.
It's fine, thank you. So yeah, I think it was useful to see how the EPP demand looked like. So we have covered now the EPP demonstration. It was 45 minutes, more or less. So I don't know if we should break for another 5 minutes before we go to dollarization, or we should go in one shot. What do you think, Brian?
I think we could do it in one shot.
Yeah, because it's not long, right? So let me share my screen 1 second to connect with the slide where we introduce the dollarization. Yeah, here it is. So let me share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, David.
Okay, so as we said, EPP, what Brian showed, is one of the components of the gross demand, no? And it's the creation of the project header. But then we eventually have the gross demand that comes in quantities for goods, even though it comes in dollar value for services. Okay, so when we want to convert that gross demand to dollar value, we have the dollarization process. This is what Brian is going to show, or at least is going to show one of the templates that is called dollarization, and allows us, also as a price planner, but also if you are interested in that as a senior demand planner, how to have visibility of the different unit prices that we are getting from the system. Okay, so Brian, I believe you're going to show now dollarization template, right?
Yes, David.
Okay, so we'll see that information in the system, and this is one of the, for price planner, actually there will be a job aid very soon being published, so you can see that also in the job aid, but we wanted to give you a highlight of how the dollarization process works. Over to you, Brian.
All right, thank you, David. So let's go back to our supply chain planning tool templates, and you should be able to see my screen now. All right, so as I showed you before, as a local planner, we can go directly to the new view icon. And once we click on it, we would select the template from the dropdown that is called dollarization, 70 right here. Once we have selected this template, once again, you'd have all your data according to the time, attributes, key figures by the template that you have selected. All we would have to do, just to show you guys for one specific plant, is set our filters. If the planner doesn't set the filters, the system will always retrieve all the data that it has for all the plants and all product IDs, at least in the training environment, right? So we always save the loading time by adding the plant that we want to see the information for, in this case, and also the product ID that we will want to check. In this case, I have already saved one of the product IDs. Now you can simply paste it directly into the box and that should work, or you can go to the match box here and also search by this product ID and see that it's been selected already. Now the local planner, once that has been set up, would simply, and what we can do here just to make sure that we don't have to go back and do it again, is we'll copy the filters that I have added for the one tab that I'm looking at to all the other tabs. Okay, again, these are actions that are performed by the local planner. And let's launch this dollarization template and see what it looks like. So David already explained what we should be seeing in this template, right? We're going to be looking at the MAP value, the contract price, the PO price, the fair market value price. So we should be seeing a list of key figures and data related to each of them. And now I've selected a product so that you see that in the dollarization template, even if you select a product, the value that is going to be displayed is going to be shown in US dollars, okay, not in quantities. If we're looking at services, again, we would still be looking at the US dollar value for that service as well. So once this template loads, we'll be able to understand what David was explaining as when he said that the system prioritizes the prices, right, in an order from contract to PO value to MAP, and the fair market value being the highest because it's the one that's also dependent on the price planning. So the template should be loading in a few seconds. And let's take a look now in the system at what that looks like. Okay, so here we are. Very simple. I just have one product ID that I've selected, which is still the oil machine, and the key figures that I was talking about. So remember, as David was mentioning, we have our contract unit price, our PO unit price that I'm going to mark in a different color, the MAP unit price. So they're all displayed here. These are all the prices that are available to us in Umoja production. So that's why they are displayed here. And then of course, our fixed unit price, variable unit price, and fair market value, which would be dependent on the price planner. So I'm going to mark these all in green. And at the end, at the bottom, the calculated final price according to the prioritization of these prices. So let's understand that a bit. If we're looking at the key figures and we're looking at June, specifically here, June 2021, we understand that for this oil machine, there's a value of $462 as our contract unit price. That's the value for the contract unit price, which should have priority over the PO and over the MAP value if we have all those values displayed like we do here. The PO unit price is $449 and the MAP unit price is $453. We don't have any data for the fair market value, so this one will not have priority over the others. Okay, so which one is going to be our final calculated price? As David was explaining, the one that has priority, which is our contract unit price, 462, and that's why it's the one that is displayed at the bottom as our calculated final price for the gross demand for this particular product ID, which is the oil machine. All right, and I can highlight that one probably here in blue so we can differentiate. Okay, so now you can see what David was explaining in the PowerPoint in the system and why and how we could say the system prioritizes the prices. If we had a fair market value price, fixed unit or variable price, these would have priority over the contract PO and MAP unit price. Yeah, I'm sure there's questions, David, because this template always generates some discussion.
Yeah, there is actually one question from Stephen or a comment. Is the real contract price, if the real contract price is not in USD, then foreign fluctuation will mess up all the planning figures? Yeah, that's actually a good question. The system is also making transformation to USDs, and what will affect? So in the case of the gross demand, okay, itself in the dollarization process, remember that this is only a conversion. So yes, if the contract is in a different unit price, when we are going to dollarize, the value may have variations, right? When based on that, it will not going to mess up the planning, the gross demand planning figures, because we are managing them in quantities, right? But for services particularly, yes, they could change. So I'm not sure how the contracts, if they are defined in local, if they are defining the local currency. I know in the supply chain planning tool we have conversions that is also extracted from Umoja. So yeah, there could be these variations in that sense. So Kong is asking, so the planning is in USD by default. There is no room to adjust or for exchange rates. Same to Stephen question. So actually yes. Actually, in the supply chain planning tool, we can also show the planning in different currencies. Okay, so if that also helps to Stephen's point, when we go to edit view, Brian, the dollarization is of course, as its own name says, is converted to US dollar. Okay, but when we go to key figures section in the when we display information in the key figures, we have two drop downs below, one for target currency and another for target unit of measure. So if we are displaying a particular service or certain demand that we know it's extracted with a different currency, we can change that and display it in the local currency. But the conversion of the gross demand value will always be in dollar, no, as it happens with the budget. The budget is formulated in dollar. So I believe this dollarization process is pretty much oriented to the integration with the budget down the road, and also to have value of the demand in dollar. But as we mentioned before, ideally gross demand should be formulated in quantities. Okay. So thank you, Brian. There are no more comments or questions. Not sure if you're done with that, or we want to mention something else. It's 3 o'clock, so it's another hour that is spent already.
Fine. David, yeah, there's nothing left for me to.
Okay, and then let's go on break. Okay, let's have maybe a longer one now because it's 2 hours. So let's have 10-minute break, and when we come back, we will review the adjustment of the gross demand, and we will continue with the net demand presentation. Okay, let's have a 10-minute break if it's okay with you, Brian.
Sounds good, David.
Okay. So see you in 10 minutes. Okay, thank you, Brian, for sharing the timer. And yeah, the 10 minutes are over. So please, if you can confirm that you are back, so we can continue with the session. That would be great. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to thank you for that. We're going to see another process that is performed by the senior demand planner. Also, the supply chain manager can do this action. So let me recap a bit what we saw and what we're going to see now, right? So I'm going to share my screen, and then as usual, Brian, if you can confirm that you can see it.
Yes, David, we can.
Thank you, Brian. So remember that, yeah, we always, in these first 2 hours of the session, we're talking about the gross demand formulation itself, so the demand planning, but the gross demand portion that tries to identify goods and services that are required to operate the entity. Okay, where that's the important word. And as we said, the gross demand has 3 components. So initially, all right, we have the statistical forecast is one of them, then entity priority project and additional demand. Brian showed already how to create the project header, right? And then once we have gross demand, we had the dollarization process to convert all gross demand to demand value in dollar. Okay, this is what Brian also showed, that even though it's automatic, Brian showed one of the templates that allows to see the different unit prices in what the system is taking automatically. Now, the idea is to see now how we review and adjust gross demand in the system. And just for that, we have like two short slides. One is what we understand as calculated demand or gross demand. You will see in the solution that contains the statistical forecast, the APP demand, and the additional demand. All right. And then here on the calculated demand is where we're going to perform the adjustment as senior demand planner. All right. As we said, local demand planner should be acting on the statistical forecast, on the APP demand, and on additional demand itself. Well, you as senior demand planner and supply chain manager, you, if needed, you will adjust directly the output of to get the final gross demand. All right. And of course, will include quantity and value, so because of the dollarization process. But it's important to verify that when you are reviewing the gross demand, that includes all the components. So for every product, we will be able to see it's a statistical forecast, it's entity priority demand, and it's additional demand. And now it will be possible to adjust the final gross demand. As we said, it is the senior demand planner typically you can do it for some of the products, and it's important to review that, because it may happen that based on the good issuance pattern, you may have also sometimes some equipment demand forecasted, right? And then we may have the replacement of existing or equipment in use. So it's good that from this template we're going to show, you see all the demand coming from the different elements, so we can double check that there is no double demand. Okay, and remember that the final gross demand is displayed as quantities for materials and by default in dollar value for services. Okay, there is an exception to this statement about services and managing value, because fuel is displaying quantity. But we have it in quantity, and we also have it for the case of goods. We have it in quantity, but we also have it in value because of the dollarization process. So let me show to you how is this done in the system, and please pay attention because it's the first time you see that. And Brian explained the part of the master data, but now we're going to introduce a new area to you, which is where we have the templates, actually, where Brian opened the EPP template and dollarization template. So if you can see my screen, after the login process, we get to this SAP IBP tab. Right? Brian explained, we go to login.umoya.un.org, and then we open the supply chain planning tool or the IBP dev if we are in training environment. But eventually we'll get and we'll log on with our credentials, and this Excel pops up. That is not an Excel that you have in your own machine, but it's an Excel that opens kind of in the cloud. No, it's using Citrix. So we are connected to that, and on the right side, or I think maybe the middle of the screen actually, we have this master data workbook where you create the project header. But most of the actions that the local demand planner will take will not happen here, right? Most of them will be views of the gross demand data that is stored in the cloud, and for that we have templates to display. So in this case, but in other case, we always when you want to review the gross demand, we will go to this new view and we'll say from template. Okay, we're going to select one template that will give us the gross demand for our entity. And then when we click on open from template, we have here a drop-down menu with all the templates available. Okay, there are quite a number. In gross demand, historical data to cleanse and statistical forecast. This allows to view what is the system doing automatically in general terms. There is another one for equipment, but the purpose of this demonstration is to show this template. It's 60 gross demand. Okay, so we click on gross demand. And now we can apply different filters to get data for our entity. So we have, by default, on the left side, there are different, let's say, configuration items of this template, but you don't need to change anything. By default, it will come with a rolling plan for the next 24 months from June 2021. We'll have some attributes loaded by default and some key figures. I will explain now the key figures. And then we have the filter. Okay, in the filter, we're going to enter our entity and we will enter the products or serve the materials or services that we want to analyze. So instead of opening a new one, I already opened one, so I'm going to click on edit. So I modify the one I selected, not to load it twice. Okay, and then in the filter area, I'm going to enter, so you see it, some filtering options that you would use also in your entity. So if you want to see only data for your entity, you have to click here on add attribute and then say plant. Of course, if you have any local demand planner that in your entity or working with you that went already through the full training, they are very used to this because they did a lot of exercises. So if you have any doubt as well, you can work together, and of course you can write to us. So want to see only my entity. I will say now I will select KE00, which is the plant of my entity. Okay, it's not my entity, the one I'm going to use as an example. So if I filter by plant equal to K00, I will only get data from this entity. And now I want to see some products. In your case, you may want to see some groups of products, or you may use in the future a filter predefined that will give you all the products. But if you want to see a particular one, we click on add attribute. We say product ID. And here we're going to enter some products that have been that we can use as an example. For example, okay, this is one of the PIDs I'm using. I believe it's from a blank card ID. Another product that I would use for this demo, I think it's this one that is used. I think it's an additive on the diesel or something like that. And then to services, so you also see how the services look like. This is, I think, some ration service, and the other one, I believe, it's medical hypercare service or something. Okay, I have defined in the filter area of the template is the only one you need to touch. I have defined two elements: plant KE00, my plant, and product ID, okay, my products. By default, there was a line already. Some of you may be asking why. So by default, we are excluding spare parts from this gross demand formulation process, because spare parts will be managed. I mean, the C# is made to manage demand of spare parts from the inventory levels themselves. Okay, so they will not be included in the gross demand, because for spare parts, some stock levels and reorder points will be defined, and the system will manage that automatically. This is done with a different functionality of SAP. It's not in the supply chain planning tool. So spare parts, we are excluding them from that demonstration. So let me click on OK and see what we get. This would be the gross demand for these 4 products. And then I'll try to explain how the template looks like, what information we have there, and so on. Okay, so now from left to, this is what we got from the system after I click on OK. So let me explain to you from left to right what we have. So we have first the plant column. All right, so it's saying that all these products that we see, we are going to be reviewing demand formulated for this plant. Then we have commodity ID and commodity description. Okay, that is, if you don't know what's a commodity, and we will introduce that with the presentation also later, it's kind of group of products. No, so for example, this product here, additive diesel, belongs to the commodity called fuel treatment. This product that is called card blank ID belongs to the commodity called ID cards and or vans or similar products. This nurse intensive care belongs to the commodity temporary medical staffing needs. So commodity, a commodity is a group of products. I will explain later what has happened with the material master catalog and how the new hierarchy has been implemented. But here's the thing: we have the plant, we have information about the commodity. So if you are going to be reviewing gross demand for a particular commodity, for all products within a commodity, you can always filter by commodity instead of filtering by product. But let me, I will hide them later to have more screen. Then we have this column here, okay, with the product ID, and we have the product description, okay. So we have product ID and product description, and then these columns that will give us additional information. So, for example, the first one is telling me product type, right? So this column product type, the one I'm going to highlight in yellow, will tell us if the product is good or is material. All right. So here we have several blocks. The first one is good. Sorry, is material or goods. Second one is materials, while third product is a service, and fourth product is a service. Okay, these are the 4 products ID that I selected. Now we have another column more. So if I may, let me grade out this one again. So I'll do it. So you look at what I'm highlighting. So we have another column called quantity value, and this will tell us if this product is managed in quantity or value, or in other words, that the numbers that we see on the right area of the screen are quantities, a number of items, right? Or if they are dollar value. So as you see, these two, the area that I'm highlighting in green, both products are managed in quantity. So this number that we see here is number of items. So for example, if we say here blank card ID, I need 420 in July, okay, or in August, it's 420. It will be 420 cards. So in this template, you have the products, and you have a time range of next 2 years, 24 months, with the quantities that will be required and when they will be required. Okay, the first 2 products are in quantity. The last 2 are in dollar value. Okay, the last 2 are services. So the numbers that you see here that I'm highlighting Okay, this is dollar value. So this demand for this product, it's already in dollar value. So you will not find quantities in these cases, okay, because they are managed in values. Then we also have another column that says ABC code. This is related to segmentation, okay? So if we would represent all the products within a commodity, you will get some of them marked as A, some others as B, and some others as C. So the one that I displayed here before, I mean the first one, it's classified as C. Okay, so that's another column. All the other ones are classified as same for this. Of course, this is training environment data. We stage it manually, so it would depend on your real production. Okay, but here is a summary. So we have commodity ID and description that gives us information about the nature of these products, product ID and description. Then it tells the material type, and if they are matching quantity and a segmentation code. And then we'll have on the right side of the screen, if you allow me to hide some columns actually, we'll have on the right area of the screen a time range that goes from current month plus 24 months. So this, what you will see, the figure that you will see are the demand plan for next 24 months. If you remember this example of the card that I was showing, you will see always the next 24 months, regardless of what budget cycle you're working. Okay, now let me bring this back to Gray and we'll explain, let's say field by field or key figure by key figure, the information the supply chain planning tool is showing. Okay, so let me bring this back to Gray, and for that I should focus maybe in one of the products. So let me remove from the filter some of them so you don't see so many numbers. I will show one material and I will show one service, and then you will get very quickly, I'm sure, what is the process to update or to adjust Proxima. Let me try, I think it is one, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it is one, the one I want to focus on. Yeah, the blank card ID, okay? So now I'm displaying the gross demand for next 24 months of the blank card ID. So every line here represents the type of data that we are displaying. We have first the final statistical forecast. We have another one called final EPP demand, another one called additional. If you realize, looking at the presentation that I showed before, here statistical forecast, EPP demand, and additional demand, they are the three components of the gross demand, right? You also have it here: final statistical forecast, EPP demand, and additional demand. So let me highlight them and you see what we got. If you are the senior demand planner and you analyze this, you will see, okay, final statistical forecast, I'm highlighting in green. This is the forecast that we got, okay, from the system doing the statistical forecast plus the review of the local demand planner. Okay, so we are saying that we will need 420 cards a month. Okay, even though this one is constant only by chance. If you see services, you will have different figures. It's not an average. The forecast is much more sophisticated. So we have here the final statistical forecast, the final EPP demand. So it happens that this product, apart from being regularly used, has been included in one of the projects. So if you look at the month of August, you'll see how you have a final EPP demand of 100 for month of August, and you have a statistical forecast of 420 for the month of August. Okay, so in this particular example, you have in 1 month demand coming from these two components that we mentioned: statistical forecast and EPP demand. And there is a third key figure that is called additional demand, all right, that you see here, and there is also certain additional demand that was requested for that month. Okay, as a result, in the gross demand, we have the key figure, and this is the one I want to show. It is called calculated base gross demand that I'm highlighting now in yellow. That contains, before any adjustment, the gross demand that is created by the addition of these three. Okay, as the slide show. So what would be the gross demand of this product card blank ID in August? 420 plus 100, 520 plus 207, 120. You see, this is the addition of the other. So if you look at this one here, you already get the combination of the three gross demand. Okay, so you don't really need to, unless you want to go more into detail, you don't really need to go and see where it's coming from. This demand is managing quantity. So apart from the quantity, you have also gross demand value. Okay, that is the dollarization of that demand. Okay, I believe here we have values that are too high because maybe the unit price is not right. But the point is the system will convert that gross demand quantity into dollar value. If we see values that are too high, probably if we go to the dollarization of this product, we will see some alerts there, like the prices between contract and POs maybe don't match because maybe there are different packings or something. Okay, so, but here is how the system dollarized, right? Sorry if the amount is too high for 720 blank card ID, maybe there are boxes, maybe there are pallets, I don't know. But here we have calculated base gross demand, which is actually the input that arrives to you as a gross demand for this product. Now, the next key figure is very important for you. Okay, let me highlight it in red. Actually, let me get rid of other colors. Okay, so we have a calculated base gross demand that we said is what arrives to you as a gross demand for next month. And then we have, sorry that it was white and now it became grayed out. And we have the adjusted gross demand. Let me just refresh the slides so you get it with the right colors.
Yeah, and David, if you could just zoom in a little bit.
Yeah, sorry, I was not checking the chat. Not sure if there is any question already.
No, just the question about zooming in, that's it.
Okay. So I hope it's better now. Okay, so we said you as a senior demand planner, you get the calculated base gross demand that if I can translate that into simple terms, it is the requirement for the next 24 months of this product, month by month. Now you as a senior demand planner, you will analyze this. I'm highlighting in yellow now. You will analyze this, you will review from where it's coming, and then based on your analysis from a senior perspective and your planning intelligence and experience and understanding of the nature of the product that you are reviewing, you may say, you know what, I think we need to reduce this a bit because maybe part of what's included here in the final EPP demand is also added here. So maybe it shouldn't be 720 as a gross demand here, or maybe November, December, January will not have the need for so many blank card IDs, or there is risk to need more of them because we have some contingent coming that, of course, that is not in the plan or is not cannot be forecasted based on the past data. So based on your analysis, for the good of the service, you may want to adjust gross demand. And very important here, you really need to listen to this thing. So if you are not checking your emails, please don't miss this sentence. All right, when you perform the adjustment of the gross demand, you will enter already the final value. So if we say we have 720 here, and we want to make it less, right? We will never ever enter negative amounts. Okay, we will always put the final quantity. So if instead of 720, I said, no, we just need 600s, you will enter 600s and you will save it. Okay, very important, especially for you as senior demand planner. Another functionality that is used to add planning notes that will allow later in the future to review with supply chain manager, but also with local demand planners. So if you make an adjustment and you want to justify a bit adjustment, you will do, apart from entering and clicking on save, that is the normal process, you can also add a planning note, doing right click on the cell that you want to add a planning note, and you select add planning note. These are the two actions, only two actions that the senior demand planner will need to perform: analyzing and adding an adjustment, and entering a planning note. So in the planning note, we can just say, after review of additional demand and verification with local planner, I assess that, okay. So, but we can enter a planning note and we can justify that. Now we click on OK, and then a planning note will be saved. So anytime anyone passes with the mouse over this cell, we will get this. After review of additional demand and clarification with local planner, well, this is my note actually, right? So we will get a message with a pop-up with the note that we entered. If someone else entered a planning note, we'll have the same effect. We'll see this red triangle, and if we stop the mouse over, we'll get the message. But let's say that we add this adjustment and maybe we made 100 demand for other months. Okay, and maybe, I don't know, we increase this one to 600 or whatever. And then after we make our adjustments, I go to the CPI-BP and I click on Save Date. And here we get a pop-up window as well to justify the reason code of the general, let's say, amendment that we did. So here you have different options that refer to the different templates. So you would choose the one that fits better. Imagine that, for example, this one is related to budget constraints and adjustment after the budget constraints, so you justify. But this is it, okay? We'll go to the template, we filter by the product, and then we enter adjustments. And you see, after we save, the gross demand key figure changed immediately. Now the amount in August is 600 as we enter. Okay, and these ones as well. So the adjustment is visible in the key figure called gross demand. So gross demand is after our adjustment. All right. Now the last two key figures will not change immediately because they need a job to run in the system, but they will change in the following hours. Okay, so also don't get scared if you perform your adjustment and you don't see your change right away reflected in final gross demand. You should see it in the gross demand. Okay, I think Sayed, this is exactly what I was explaining. So let me see the question. Why is final gross demand is still 720? Exactly. So these two key figures that I'm going to highlight now in red. Okay. Or actually, we can focus on the final gross demand. This one, it will be refreshed by a job that runs in the supply chain planning tool. So you as a senior demand planner, if you perform adjustments, you will see changes immediately in the gross demand, in the one that I highlight in yellow. Okay. After the job will run, you will also see it in the final gross demand. Actually, if you are curious, I can run the job myself and you will see the change being applied. Otherwise, just believe me that it will take some time, but it will be reflected then. Okay, so the reason why this final gross demand didn't change is because we just performed the adjustment. Okay, it's just an operation that the system does automatically. Okay, but I can also force it and make it manual from here. It is called copy final gross demand. No, what it's called. It's one of these one. I think it's the one. Copy gross demand to final gross demand. Okay, it's not automatic. Now there is, thank you, Syed. Kong is asking, how is the statistical forecast populated? Total yearly demand divided by 12 of historical monthly consumption. Okay, linking demand forecast to liquidity forecast would be the next Big step, yeah, indeed. So the statistical forecast is performed in the following way. So the system will look at how month by month consumption was generated, was produced, sorry, and then it performed a statistical analysis using two mathematical methods. One is called Croston, one other one it's called exponential smoothing. There are two mathematical methods used to forecast, actually, based on time series. Okay, let me close this thing. And that is how it's projected. So don't think that it's an average, because this one, it happened to be constant. But if I show now the services, for example, you will see, if we look at the services, this one was an example. You'll see now a different example. No worries, Anash. No worries. Now I'm checking. Okay, so if I represent, for example, the gross demand of this product in the chart, because this also the templates have a chart functionality that I'm going to use now. Right, so if I click here, I will be able to display a chart. Okay, and then I can say there are too many columns. I will need to hide some of them, but I can tell the system, please show me the gross demand for this product. So I would choose calculated base gross demand, or even our gross demand, for example. I click on plus, and I say show me only this product, right? This nurse intensive care. I click on plus here, so I select the product. I click on plus, and then I'm going to hide some columns so you see them better. So you can see here is a forecast from the system that has some seasonality as well, because analyzing the historical data of this product, the system understood there was seasonality in the past and is projecting that seasonality. Okay, so this is how the system is forecasting. All right, there is another template that explains everything, and another full session on forecasting that contains full details. So yeah, we can get into these details in a different session. I hope that clarifies. All right, so the adjustment here, notice that these two services are managed in value, okay? So what you see here are dollar amounts, right? But still, so it's important that you notice that. So if you want to modify and say, no, we don't need, let's say we don't need in August, September, this amount, we just need $500, you can do it. Or if you want to increase, right? You say, no, I want 2,000, you will enter the final amount. The process is pretty much the same. And then if we want, we can add some fun notes. Okay. Increase due to risk analysis, risk assessment, etc. And then we click on save. Right? Is that clear? I know it's boring to listen for 3 hours in a training online, but I hope showing the system makes it a bit more appealing to you. Okay, any question about this gross demand adjustment template? Is it clear? You can give us also positive feedback in the chat if you want. If you have no other questions, we would appreciate if you can say yes, it's clear, or something that let us know that we can continue. Or if you want me to show or to clarify something else. I didn't get into this, by the way, I didn't get into this key figure. UN reservation, it's more for local demand planner, but it contains information about items that are in stock that are already reserved. So it means that there could be some demand immediately happening. Of course, for services, don't apply. Okay, but as a summary, remember in this template, coming back to the example of the, actually to the example of the product of the Landcard ID. Okay, Sorry, I put in too many zeros. So remember that here you have final statistical forecast, you have the final project demand and the additional demand. And we have calculated base gross demand automatically, and then you perform your adjustments, and they are transferred to final gross demand after a while. Okay, Brian, I'm not sure if this is clear, or if it's okay, or we should show something else. Otherwise, I think we can move ahead with the agenda. And before going to net demand, I want to show about the planning process. Brian, any suggestion, any question, any comment? I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to look for the presentation on the planning process.
No, David, it seems everything's clear. Nothing's new on the chat.
Okay.
Last message was the last one. So it's a good idea to move on. We're at 3:45, so we still had an hour and 15 minutes.
Exactly. So I think I'm going to try to explain now about the planning process, and then we'll have another break, and we'll get into net demand after that, no? Because the planning process will first impact gross demand portion. Okay, and I think some of the participants actually may have been I don't know, designated or appointed or may have volunteered as planning process coordinators for the first, let's say the first times that we do the supply chain planning process and demand planning, the gross demand formulation. So I want to explain a bit how it works, how we're going to be able to track that, because you're going to be doing this in operationalization. Of course, it's only to give you an idea, and during the operationalization process, where you do by first time your first gross demand plan, you will be able to ask and to understand better. Okay, but for now, let me introduce the concept of the planning process, how it's managed in the supply chain planning tool, and then you can relate to that when you will start in your entity the first time with the gross demand formulation or plan. Okay, so let me share my screen again. Sorry, I feel like we're killing you with so much information. It's very condensed, but because your actions in the system are limited as well. I mean, from the training strategy point of view, they thought it was better this than keeping you for 1 week in the training. Brian, can you see my screen?
Yes, David, we can.
Okay, now I'll try to speak about the planning process. So I was expecting this question from some of you, know, because we talk about the end-to-end process, right? What starts first? We have historical data review, then we have something automatically by the system. There is also product segmentation. We have to create the APP header, otherwise the local demand planner cannot be add items to this project. No, there are some tasks that need to be done, or there are some process steps to be more accurate, to be able to formulate gross demand. How is all this orchestrated or coordinated? And this is where we need to introduce the planning process, no? How the planning process works. And for that, we're going to be using a different interface of the system. The one that we showed already, this one, is an Excel-based interface for it's called actually IBP, SAP IBP, where the local demand planner and you as well will perform main, let's say, transaction. No, I mean, no, they are not going to be transaction, but we perform the planning in operational terms. But the coordination of the process is not done from here. It's done from a different interface. It's more user-friendly, or maybe different because it's a kind of web-based. And this is called Fiori. That's why you will see here reference to a Fiori system in a few seconds. Right, so remember that the Moja is composed by different components. No, we have ECC, we have SRM. Okay, that in ECC you see all the inventory items, for example, and equipment information. In SRM you have contracts, you have creation of shopping carts and PO. We have EFMS for fuel management system, and the supply chain planning tool is the component itself of Moja, but it has two environments. or two user interfaces, two environments. One is the Excel environment, the one that Brian and myself were showing so far. But there is another one that is called Fiori. All right, and this Fiori environment is only it's web-based, okay, and it has some functionality that is a bit more advanced, like creation of analytics, creation of dashboards, sharing of filters, for example, sharing of list of products, creation of user groups. Is a bit of the back end of the system, and here as well in this Fiori where we manage the planning process. So the only way we have to know if something, some process step has been done. So we're going to focus on this Fiori, and Fiori has a lot of functionalities, but for usability, it's important to understand how the managed process works in general terms. Again, you don't need to be very detailed, but then when they will talk to you about Fiori, it's better if you know what we mean by that. So we have managed processes here, okay. And when we get into Fiori, this is how it looks like. There will be a number of tiles, right? A number of applications, very similar to how the nowadays smartphones look like. And we're going to use managed processes to review the planning process. Okay, there are different, every tile will have different, I mean, there are tiles for very a lot of different functionalities, but we want to focus on the gross demand planning process. So this slide should be familiar to you already, because this is how all the steps on the formulation or main steps on the formulation of the gross demand, and every process step could be done automatically by the system or may require a review or an action from the planner. So all these steps are being transferred to the Fiori process as a combination of process steps that you see here with different colors, okay? So different users are responsible to take over different process steps. For example, the light blue that you see here that doesn't have any user role assigned to it, they are managed by the project team or by the ERPSD unit, no? the more technical unit. Then we have one step that is maintain or review unit price, that is in red, that is done by the price planner. Okay, one of your roles. And then most of the actions, even though some of them are just reviewed, no, of what is done automatically by the system, but all these oranges are done by the local demand planner. I don't think it is a lot of work, because it will really depend also on the number of products that the planner is managing. Okay, for sure, review consumption history would require some time to have a proper consumption data. And then we have two processes here, two steps here: maintain or review EPP header. This is what Brian explained. Okay, this is responsibility of the senior demand planner. And the finalization of the gross demand that I just explained how to review and adjust. This is done by senior demand planner and also local supply chain. So let's say that for every in the process of planning gross demand, these are the actions that need to be done periodically. Of course, the creation of the project, it happens only once, okay? But the review of the final gross demand could be done periodically, right? This is typically a monthly process, right? But don't get me wrong, because once you have the 24-month plan, the next month you will only need to analyze or review more carefully the new month that arrived, right? If we go to next month, then the review of consumption history of last month will be very important, and also the projection of the next month in the future. But all these are like process steps that need to be taken. How do we track? How do we know if the price planner reviewed the price? How do we know if the senior demand planner created the project header? How do we track all this? And this is what is done in Fiori. There is one application that is called Managed Process, okay? That contains for every entity a monthly process that is triggered. And this is where the users will be able to access it and say, I completed my part, I did my part. Okay? All right, this is only an example of how to map users. So I will take this maybe 5-10 minutes to show to you how to track this in Fiori. And then if you get the role of the coordinator and you need to maintain, to update some steps, you will be able to do it. If not, at very least, when the tasks, the process steps that are assigned to you, okay, you can check them here. Okay, you can say, okay, I did the creation of the project header, or I reviewed the final gross demand. So you need to go somewhere and say done. So how do we access to this place? This is a different, it's a different place. Sorry for the news about Catalonia in Spain. So we go to a different environment, that is the Fiori environment. So you will have an address to access there. Okay, and then you will enter with your credentials. I have to enter my password. Okay, I have to enter here the PIN. So now I get to this Fiori interface. So we set it's called manage processes. So we need to open this application. I can go from General Planner because I know it's here. But I can come and search directly here, manage process. Okay. I'll see it now, manage processes. Okay, this is the one. So you, as a local demand planner or senior demand planner or as a coordinator of this process at the beginning, you will come here, okay, and you will see under your processes. Typically, you will see a process with processes assigned to you. Okay. Now I think they clean up the list of processes, so I don't see all of them. But if I open one of these processes, we should see the list of steps that I was referring to here. But in other words, it's the same as the list of steps we have there. Okay, some of them are automatic, some of them are only review. So if you look at this list of steps, you will see that they are here. Okay. Now, each process step will be assigned to a person here. We have a Casper, who is our colleague in the project team, that got all of them, and Brian got a couple of them. Okay, but yeah, you will get a list of process step for every monthly process. I think this one, it's a kind of gross demand. Let me see if I can get another one. I don't know, Brian, are you aware if they deleted the ones that we used for the gross demand training?
Yes, they deleted all of them, and I had them created for yesterday's training, those two.
Okay, so all right. So now they have gross demand. Okay. Okay, so I can open this one. So, for example, if you see, I think they merge net demand and gross demand process steps. So if we focus on this one, for example, you will see this one: maintain, review unit price, and we see here maintain, review unit price. So this process was assigned to someone. Okay. So because I'm no owner anymore, maybe Brian, you can log in at the same time. So we will show the button to change the task, the process step. Okay, because I'm not step owner anymore on this one. Could you please log in, Brian, and we'll share your screen for a moment? We cannot hear you, Brian.
Yeah, so, just give me 1 second because I have to log into that one.
Okay. But just in the meantime, what I want to express is that the gross demand process has a number of steps that need to be taken. No? Some of them are very important, critical for review of consumption history. Some other, or the creation of the project quantities that are required. Some others are done by the system, and it's only a review. And then if we want to adjust something, they will adjust. And some others are very important, right? Like the finalization of the gross demand. So in this Fiori interface, a process will be created for your entity, where you will be able to see these steps being assigned to someone. Okay. Now, the person responsible of this step, for example, the person responsible of the maintain or review entity project header will be able to come here and say, I already did it. And they will have a button here to say mark as complete. Are you ready, Brian? Okay, so maybe you can share your screen.
Sure. All right, so here we go. You wanted to see what it looks like, right? When I'm one of the process step owners.
Exactly. So they see how to mark as complete. So when we will open one of these processes, I think the second one, I'm not sure if the first one has all the gross demand steps.
Let's see, related master data.
Ah, yeah, it does. Okay. So then you can open, for example, the review product related master data, even though it's not one of the ones. It's already in progress. Maybe you changed it already. So you can open it. And then you have two buttons. Now, in this case, it's already started. So you have mark as not started, or if you click on the three dots, you should have mark as completed. So when the person responsible of that process steps is done, will come here and say mark as complete. And then if you are coordinator and you want to know if the tasks are marked as completed, you will see it here. You have two indicators. In the process step itself, you have the status is completed or not started, but also if you go to the process list, you have a kind of completion indicator, right? Like this one. Now it says 3.8, the overall progress of the planning process. All right. So this is what we wanted to show. That apart from the planning process itself, there is a way that we will be tracking, or it will be tracked. Not us, of course. It will be tracked if the planning process is advancing, or if it's completed, or if there is a task that is already done. And then if there is dependency, for example, the local demand planner will know if the PP headers have been created before start trying to edit to enter the items. Okay. Thank you, Brian, for sharing that.
No problem.
Is there any question about that part of the content, the planning process and how we track that in this other interface called Fiori? I know you may need to review this video several times because it's a lot of information. But if you already have a question. Okay. So, Xavier, as a senior demand planner, you don't need to review that. Okay, as a senior demand planner, unless you have been assigned or you have been designated as planning process coordinator, that is a function that they are using in the interim. But as a senior demand planner, okay, I'm not sure if I'm sharing my screen already. Yeah, I'm sharing it. You will be responsible of these two steps. So when you are done with the creation or maintenance of the project header, entity priority project header, you will go to your project step and you will mark it as complete. Now only, and this is done monthly because I believe the process of the gross demand will be triggered monthly. So if the project header was already created, then in the next iteration, unless you need to maintain something, you will not need to do it. But the finalization of the gross demand or the review, yes. If you are assigned or appointed as a coordinator, then yes, then you would be the first time at least, you will be monitoring this thing, okay, until the entity decides how it's going to be managed. Not necessarily you will need a coordinator all the time. Okay, so senior planner, you're responsible of the steps that I marked in blue. This, and it will be assigned to you probably. Okay, all right, thank you, Xavier. Okay, any other question or comment? If not, then I think we can take another short break. Maybe these 6 minutes, Brian.
Sounds good, David. 6 minutes sounds perfect.
And I like these 6 minutes, so it's more than 5. Okay, so see you in 6, and we will try to complete the rest of the topics. So we'll see net demand and a bit of source planning. Okay, see you later. So Brian, will you share the timer? Yeah.
happens. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, thank you, Ryan. All right, this is actually very intense training, you know, with all this information condensed in 4 hours. Let's go now to the recap of where we were, and we continue with the demand process. So let me find the slide, the gross demand, and yeah, so we still have to touch a few concepts. So let me please share my screen, and then Brian, you can confirm right away.
We see it.
Okay, you can, Brian? I couldn't hear you well.
Yes, David. Yeah, I said we see it. It's clear.
Oh, okay, excellent. Okay, so we saw so far the. Let me just highlight what we saw. We had the introduction. We discussed actually the gross demand process, and then we saw in the system few demonstrations. Right, we saw the EPP, how to create a project header, the adjustment of the gross demand, and then a bit of dollarization. So now we're going to touch a few elements. Planning level, we'll also touch the user roles, and then the demand. I think it's going to be that's going to be able to cover at least. So let me skip that part. The gross demand is already explained. So we go all the way to the planning. I think the planning levels exactly is here. So we start. So what we said about the gross demand, and we were talking about product IDs, and this part might be very, very important, okay? Because now the material master catalog, and I'm sure you're familiar with that, with the material master catalog where we have all the product IDs, it's not a flat list anymore. And then there is another project running in parallel that is called Material Master Transformation Project that has created a hierarchy of product IDs. So products are not in a flat list anymore. They are grouped together into commodities, what is called commodities. It's similar to material group or similar to a group of products that make sense to be planned together. Okay? Well, in this there are two categories actually. One is the category management hierarchy that contains products grouped by business area, category, subcategory, and commodity. Okay, always the end of the hierarchy is commodity that represents a group of products. So when we are planning a demand, and especially you that might be responsible for a very long list of products, there is possibility to adapt to decide at what level we want to plan. If we want to see a demand product by product, that's fine, but it's also possible to see it at commodity level. Let's say you can see how many, if we talk about, let me give you maybe it's too simple as an example, but it could help. If we're talking about demand for pens, you could be interested in analyzing the demand plan of blue pens, black pens, and red pens, or individually, which could be have different PID each of them, or you could see in general the commodity for pens, right? So you may decide at what planning level you want to analyze your data, and this could happen at business area level or at category level or subcategory level, commodity or product. So also the local demand planner, when they formulate their demand, they can choose at what level they prepare demand. Okay, so you can specify how many pens you need, or you can say how many, you can specify how many blue pens you need, red pens and black pens, or you can say in general, I need 100 pens. And then the system will split that amount into blue, red, and black pens, looking at our consumption history, respecting the proportions on how they were consumed in the past. So this is category management, and there is another one that is the UNSPSC hierarchy. Maybe it's more familiar to you, but it's also ending in commodity and product. So at the end, regardless of what category we are using to analyze, regardless of what hierarchy we are using to analyze our demand or to formulate it, on the material master level, it can always be either at commodity or at product level. This is regarding material master hierarchy. But also, as we know, in the entity, you also have different levels. No, it's not the same if you formulate the demand for your whole entity, or if you formulate the demand for your service delivery pillar or your section, right? And it's not the same if you formulate the demand for your specific fund center or for one specific storage location in one location. No? It's not the same formulating demand of one product to the whole MONUSCO entity. Of course, quantity will be very high if it is for a particular engineering section in MONUSCO, or if we are talking about engineering GOMA, right? One particular one particular storage location. So that's why in the supply chain planning tool we also have three levels. When we plan at plant level, so we identify the entity with the plant, it would be for the whole entity. If we prepare our plan at planning group level, so we identify, okay, all these amounts are for this planning group. Okay, it would be at planning group level, and then will be a group of fund centers to storage location, maybe, for example, a service delivery pillar or aviation, for example. Or if we want, or if the planning process is very specific, the planner is only entering for a particular a particular fund center or a particular storage location, then we call it sublocation. So this sublocation, be careful, it might be a new concept to you. Maybe it's the first time you see it. This sublocation identifies a fund center or a storage location in your entity. Okay, so it's the smallest granular level for the demand. Would be at sublocation and product level. Okay. Any question about this planning group sublocation? This is the hierarchy, or let's say organizational structure. So when we formulate our demand, there is certain flexibility to display the demand at different levels. So if you want to see all the pens in your demand for the whole entity, you will show data at plant level without entering planning, without showing planning groups or sublocation, and at commodity level. If you want to see how many blue pens, red pens, black pens for the whole entity, you will do it at plant level still, okay, but at product level. But if you want to know how many blue pens, red pens are needed for a particular storage location, then you will go to sublocation. Okay, so this is another example of the organizational level. So you have plan, and for one plan you have several planning groups. Okay, and for one planning group you can have multiple sublocations. Okay, these sublocations, as we said, identify fund centers or storage location. Any question about the organization, the planning levels, Brian or anyone? Thank you, Karan. If there is any question about this thing, I know it's a bit abstract, but I guess during, especially for you.
Sorry, David. No, nothing right now except for Karan's message. I know we're almost at 4 hours, so people can already start feeling like it's overloading of information.
It is.
But, it would be a good moment, guys, if you want to stop for a second and ask a question. Maybe let's recuperate the track of our thoughts, because this is also very important to understand.
Yeah, I think the idea itself of the material master hierarchy, it's an important concept. So to see a list of products, to see all the cables that we are planning to acquire, you don't need to enter all the products. You can just select the right commodity. They will describe that. So you can see always demand to one group or ungroup. So you can collapse the demand and group it at commodity level, or you can see specific product demand. Same thing for the organizational structure. You will be able to see demand at plant level, but you can also see it for a specific service delivery pillar, or you can see it for a specific fund center if you want. Okay. All right. So this was all about the gross demand, and this is a summary of the user roles that are involved. We already mentioned that. Okay, so we'll not need to stop too much into this, but these roles are involved in the gross demand process. We have local demand planner, and following will have its description and functions and who will get it assigned. Thank you, Okay, so we have these roles: senior demand planner, local supply chain manager, and price planner. These are the three that were invited to this training. Okay, even though local demand planner is very important as well, they get trained in a full week training. Okay, so I guess you go to one of these roles, and here we have the description of the role. No, senior demand planner is responsible for control and oversight of demand in relation for a group of products and commodities. Okay, so I have the ability to override and adjust the final gross demand with the adjustment that we explained. So with the demos that we did, we should be okay for this part. This role should be generally assigned to a person responsible for a group of commodities or products, and then typically could be a chief of service delivery section, all right, or a technical manager. Okay, so this is the role. I guess most of you are getting this role, and then you have this profile as well. The local supply chain manager, it's similar to the senior demand planner, but it's responsible for the entity's entire demand plan. So it's not focusing on one particular group of products. Okay. So it's responsible on the demand planning process for coordinating with UNESCO and UNGC with regard to the entity demand plan. I will show now, I mean, later we'll show, if time allows, how to interact also on the net demand side. Again, this is generally assigned to the chief or head of supply chain section. And then we have the price planner that we mentioned already, and we explained the functionality. You know? So he or she is responsible to review and update the fixed variable unit price, which is actually the fair market value is the same. But it's also the one reviewing, as Brian was showing one of the templates, contract price, PO price, and moving average price. In general terms, this belongs to procurement or acquisition unit, right? Because it has a wide understanding of procurement processes and better view of prices without limits of type of products. But of course, you might need to coordinate and discuss with technical units as well. Then we have the local demand planner, which is responsible for formulating the full gross demand and needs to understand operations, how the entities know the entities' data very closely, and this should be someone in the service delivery or technical section. Okay, and then there are two more roles that I give there for your reference. Any question? If there is no question about, if there is any question about user roles or about planning levels, please let us know. Otherwise, I'm continuing to net demand. Okay, I don't see hands up, Brian. I believe therefore they should be following, but no questions if we are not showing the system now.
Exactly.
And there is maybe too much information. Okay, we will share all the presentations. So after the training or during the next days, you want to review that presentation. If you have any question, do not hesitate to contact us. Now let's talk about net demand. Yeah? So let's have an overview of the net demand. Someone, oh, very good. There is a hand up from Andre. Thank you, Andre. Over to you.
So, sorry, I just want to have a request and proposal, because it's too much terminology in terms of senior demand planner, control, etc. I would appreciate if you want, before you send in the presentation, you put probable levels of the to whom should be mapped this kind of function. For example, section technical chiefs, service delivery or service management level like pillars, or unit chiefs who has to be in there. You are verbally pronounce it, but it's not mentioned in your presentation. So it's just for you put as an example. For example, this level could be senior demand plan, could be science section chief, okay, so technical section chief, or it could be unit section unit chief. So okay. For us, it's the more we have a reference point, so we can really review the properly what we appointed right personnel, because right now we are going through the transit period. It's a lot of stuff changed and etc. And I really we really have to assign right persons since the beginning when we start to work with the tool. It's very important for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Actually, I'm not sure if I understood you correctly. I believe the information is in the slide. So for example, if we look at the senior demand planner, so there are three bullets in this explanation of the role. This is also in the user role guide. So for example, in the last bullet of this slide, we say literally, so generally, for example, for senior demand planner is the technical manager or chief of service delivery sections in an entity. Like for example, local supply chain manager is typically the chief or head of the supply chain section in the entity. Price planner, yeah.
No, I cannot see it, but okay, fine. Send it to me. I will study.
Okay, Andrei, so you don't.
Maybe I'm too old. And because my eyes are not good. Okay, thank you.
Can you see my screen is shared? Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Well, I tried for Spranier, yes, but
at the end, maybe there is a problem with this one, but check the presentation because the information that you are mentioning, I believe, is in the slides. Okay.
Good. Okay, I'm not going to do. Let's send it to us, and but
exactly.
Just my question is to ensure that these references, structural reference, organizational functional sequence, at least reflected more clearly, so people will not mess up with mapping the personalities. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry for.
No, don't worry, Andrei. Thank you. We appreciate the question. So if once you check the presentation, it's not clear, drop us a message and we'll help you. And also we will share maybe the user role guide that has more detail because this is kind of summary of what was included in the user role guide. Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you, Bertina, for the feedback. So let's talk about the net demand process. Okay. As we started before, we said gross demand is about identifying goods and services that are required to operate an entity. Well, net demand is actually from what is required in terms of consumption and replacement and so on, what really needs to be acquired. So this is done, most of it is done automatically by the system. And you were asking about the formulas or how they relate to the inventory, and here we will show. There is a first step that will be done by the local source planner, and there is automatic process and something to be done by the local source planner at the end. Okay, so the first step is the extension of the gross demand. So we got already what is needed to run our operations, but there might be a part of the demand that was not captured. For example, if we have batches that have expiration date and they are going to be expired very soon, or they were expired already, this could be added to the gross demand. Or also, if part of this demand contain products that like ambulances or kitchens, so they have products that need other products to be functional, this would be automatically done by the system. So, but once we have this extended gross demand, then the system will analyze the stock on hand. In other words, the inventory that we will have when these items are needed. We will also consider the safety stock level if it is defined for these products. So what is the level of stock that we want to maintain to minimize risks, for example, and then any other open PO or not fully delivered purchase order from the past or current that will mean that some goods are coming already or some services are going to be rendered and they were already ordered. So if they were already ordered, we don't need to order them again, do we? All this applies for services and goods, and the system automatically considering that will run heuristics, which is basically a process to analyze all the variables that we have, and will formulate automatically, okay, this is your net demand, okay, this is what the inventory level that you will have in every month. It will give us an idea of projected stock of coverage, projected periods of coverage. That means with the stock level that you have, you are fine to meet your net demand for the next 6-7 months, or as an example, of course, it will give us the number of months that we will be fine with the stock level that we have. It will also let us know when we will be receiving items, considering lead times or considering the source plan that we have as well. And then we'll prepare our source plan. So it will let us know what we need to order, and then it will give us proposals of from where to order as well. Okay, all this is done by the net demand process. And it's we can go now briefly and I can talk a bit about these elements. Okay, so you are on the same page. But this is a summary of the net demand process and the source plan formulate our source planning process actually. Okay, first, as of this slide, we said we get the gross demand from the previous process, and then there might be some short-term demand changes, like something that was unexpected that is really needed in the short term that we can add directly here, or maybe batches that are expired and are about to expire, and we want to include this as a demand as well. Okay, this is done by the local source planner. Then if there are products that has a bill of material, it's called that products that have other products that are required, no, like an ambulance that needs a defibrillator, I don't know. For example, this will be included automatically by the systems. Okay. Now regarding the stock on hand and safety stock on hand will be coming directly from Umoja inventory. Okay, so if you are managing inventory in Umoja and warehousing, the system will include all unrestricted stock items in quality inspection and all valuation type, all items or new items, they will be considered in stock. Okay, what will not be considered as a stock on hand will be items that are marked as surplus. Okay, because they are marked as surplus, of course. Spare parts that we said they are managed in a different way, and batches that are expired because we cannot, in principle, we wouldn't use them. All right. Also, items that are received virtually, that based on their Incoterms, maybe they are not the DAP. No, they might be FCA, for example. If they are not to be delivered at the place, then they will not be visible as a stock on hand, but they will be visible in a different location. Okay, so we can see them, but it's not considered stock on hand simply because it's not on hand, right? This is what is a stock on hand, and then the system considers a stock on hand because if we have 100 items, maybe we don't need to order anything. Also, the system is considering the safety stock, right? Safety stock is maintained in ECC, in Umoja ECC, but the system will use it to calculate the net demand, right? We want to guarantee a certain level of stock, and we also want to meet our gross demand. Okay, so the system will analyze that. Just remember, the safety stock is maintaining ECC. So if in our examples of bottles of water, we have safety stock of 1,000 bottles of water, for example, and we are requiring to consume 500, the system will try to do both, meet the 500s of demand and also keep the safety stock. All right. It's not only that what we need to consider, because if there are already items that are coming that were ordered, we don't need to order them again. No, I know that we track, we need to consume them, but we don't need to order because if we're already ordered, they are coming. So for that, the system will analyze open POs and STOs. All right, for goods and services, of course, for services only the POs. Okay, here you have a summary of what is included. Okay, and with that, I did a quick review of the inputs of this process. Okay, so let me recap, and if you have any questions, that's a good moment to ask. The system will account for what was included as gross demand, so what we need to consume or our requirement. The planner, the local source planner, could add short-term demand changes based on expiration of items and so on, and then the system will take into account what is our stock on hand for the month of the demand, what is our safety stock, and what is supposed to be arrived. Okay. I see there is a question or a comment in the chat. So I see Andre saying, how will demand part will interact with the supply side? Are there KPIs, turnaround times set for procurement actions for new RFP, ITB? Okay, so the supply, okay, will be met exactly. So we'll touch that, Andre, in a few minutes, because we'll be part of the source planning. So your question is very appropriate. It's just too early for me to answer that. 1 second. So as you see, okay, where am I? This should be here. In this slide, right, we made the distinction between the net demand and the source plan, right? So your question is more, we'll answer that when we touch the source plan. The point is, net demand will tell us how many items we need to acquire. With the source plan, we will identify the sourcing options to get that. Okay, so just bear with me for a moment and we will touch that. Okay, so these are the inputs. So I hope the inputs, okay, don't worry. We have the inputs for the net demand process, right? So I hope this stock on hand is clear, safety stock is clear, and POs pending receivable, pending delivery should be okay as well. So the system will analyze all these inputs and will formulate what needs to be acquired and so on. And it's called heuristic process, which is a name that is a bit mystic in my opinion, but it's nothing really very difficult to explain. So what is the heuristic is doing is, because it is a complex scenario with multiple variables and we need to provide multiple outputs for every month, it will perform some calculations, but it is not rocket science, right? So we'll say, for example, we have a gross demand of 4, so we need to consume 4, and we have the stock on hand of 3, okay? And our safety stock level is 10. So we want to keep always 10 as safety stock, but we also have to meet that. There is short-term demand chain of +2, and there are some open periods. So what would be the calculation? So 4 is our gross demand, what we need. Okay, we'll add our safety stock, 4 plus 10, it is 14. Okay, minus the 3 that we already had in stock. Okay, 11 plus short-term demand change of 2. All right, so the net demand will be 13 bottles. Okay, how many we need to source actually out of the 13? Only 11, because there are 2 coming from open POs already. Okay, now this is a simple scenario. You can make it more complicated as you want, and then of course you have to understand that you don't have to do this only for one product, but for all of them. And then it's not for the current month, right? We are doing this for next 24 months with the corresponding dependencies and calculating what will be our projected, our stock level in the future, or how many months we're going to be covered, etc. This is what the heuristic process is. So it's not possible to be done manually, but then to do it for all products with all dependencies and for all iterations in the future and considering POs coming, it will be a lot of work, and this is, I think, added value of the supply chain plan. Okay, is it clear how the heuristic process works? I think someone was asking about the formula, and we can say here, for example, that is gross demand plus safety stock, right, minus stock on hand, no, and then of course plus short-term demand change. Okay, so if there are no questions, Brian, is it clear at least the idea? You don't need to get into these maths; it's done automatically. And then, as a senior demand planner, you are not really involved in this one yet. Okay, you are more involved in the source planning process. So that's what the heuristic is done, and then is doing, and then from here we'll generate these outputs that you see on the right. I mean, net demand, right? We already mentioned goods and services to be acquired, okay, for the entity. You have there the formulas as well if you want to read them later. What about the other outputs? Okay, the projected inventory, for example, or the source plan actually. The projected inventory, I don't think I have a specific slide, but it's very simple because it will tell the planners this will be your stock level at the end of this month. This will be at the other month, the other month. So it's projecting the stock level if everything is as it was planned. If our consumption level is what we planned and our source plan is what we planned, it's projecting the projected stock. So our inventory level in the future. Okay, and then as a consequence of the net demand, the system also gives us source plan. Okay, it's automatic output. So the source plan is the services in good amount that need to be procured in order to fulfill the net demand. Okay, as long as, or for the portion that is not fulfilled by incoming stock already, okay, or existing POs pending delivery. So yeah, now we will get into the source plan. So is there any question about net demand before we get into source plan? I'm actually a bit tired as well. So if you have any a question, that would be good for me to drink. Brian, is there any question?
No, David, nothing new. Nothing in the chat, and I don't think anyone has raised their hand either.
No, I don't see that either. I see some messages, people leaving us, I guess.
Yes, that's the only update. People having to go. I know it was late already for some people when we actually started. It was already 6 p.m. for them.
Yeah, and I know when we train chiefs, that's what happened because they are also often with important meetings to attend. So, but it's good that you joined at least for the first part, and the last part you can watch the recording. So now let's talk about source planning then. And I think Andrei, who was asking now, will touch your point and see if it makes sense. So the system prepares automatically a source plan, but it doesn't mean, okay, that this is what we're going to do. No? Now we have the action of the source planner is to review that. So the system, by default, will prepare a source plan. And we know the source plan, I don't know why I'm losing the screen, maybe someone is requesting control. So the source plan that is defaulted by the system will pick external sourcing options. So it will select from existing contracts, okay, initially, if there is a contract in place, all right? So, but we know then when we talk about source planning, okay, I have to come to that back one moment. When we come to the source planning, not necessarily we're going to get, we want to get the item from the first contract that the system is picking. No, we do our analysis, we may consider lead times. Also, we know there is priority given to internal sources, no, for different reasons. So in the source planning process, we will be able to select or to change, well, not you, but the source plan, to choose the best sourcing option. Okay, and once we have our plan, there will be certain interaction between the local source planner and the plan that is preparing. It will be sent for review to the review of the UNSCHU source planner, which is actually global, could be in UNGC or UNSCHU, so a global review there, and then it can be also reviewed by the category manager. Okay, so now I'm going to show a bit of the interaction, and I think we'll get into what happens actually in the internal and the source planning process. So these are the roles that are involved in the source planning process. You see here, the senior demand planner is not here, so you don't have a role here, but the supply chain manager does have a role in the process. Okay, so how is it going to work? We have the entity on the left side in blue, and in orange we have the global. All right, so we have the starting point in the local source planner that prepares the source plan, right? And it marks as initial source plan. After his review or her reviews, after the adjustments, after selecting the most appropriate sourcing options in their opinion, will submit this source plan to HQ source plan for review. The HQ source planner will look into the plan from a global perspective, because entities might be selecting, for example, the same internal source, right? And putting together demand of both entities could be too much for the stock available in the internal source, or we may go beyond the limits of the entity if all entities are acquiring from a particular country. So there are some review done by the HQ source planner, and they will propose a source plan. Okay, that will be also reviewed by category management reviewer. Okay, that will look into this from a more efficiency and effectiveness and selection of the right contract perspective, not from a category management perspective, and they will send it back to the local source plan. The local source planner will review the plan. Okay, say okay, they propose to change this and this and that, and they will make adjustments if agreed, or if not, they will keep the plan in a different way. And that will go eventually to the supply chain manager. So the supply chain manager is at the very end of the process, will receive an adjusted source plan and could agree to that, right? Kind of approval, or also perform some some modifications, some amendment, but it's at the very end of the process. So you still need to understand what happens before more or less. So how they communicate among themselves, these roles. So we use the planning node that I also showed before in the system. Now they will put some key figure, they will do right click and it will enter planning node. The source planning options, the sourcing options that are available in the system are, of course, internal or external. So as internal, you will see in the system that there is strategic deployment stock, human reserve, surplus, okay, and UNIPS as reserve. And as external, of course, we have local, regional, and global contracts or new procurement. Okay, new procurements, of course, they don't show. So system will always select an available contract, but if there is no contract available, it will select no contract. So we know that for that particular product, solicitation process needs to start. Okay. And then the system also considers, because for every sourcing option, either internal or external for the contract, the system has the capability to maintain lead times. So this will be maintained manually, or they can also be extracted from SRM lead times, maintaining the contracts if they haven't. But the system will consider lead time. So when we prepare the source plan, if something that is required to be sourced will not might not arrive on time because of the lead time of that particular source, it will be highlighted with an alert. So the planner knows and will try to pick a different sourcing option. And that's it. What happens in the source plan? I believe, yeah, at the end of the process, there will be also an automatic snapshot being taken of the plan, so it's automatically tracked. Any question about the source plan process, or I could show briefly in the system, and then we'll close the day with the last 10 minutes of demonstration. I know there's too much to be absorbed, but maybe with the recording little by little and the content, okay, you could digest it and write to us for questions you need. This is more or less the process. What happens is all before and now. We want to show in the demonstration how is this done, and you will see it's very easy in terms of the actions that you need to take in the solution. Okay, Brian. Okay, I see a question coming. Okay, thank you, Xavier. How do you interact with the local source planner? So one of the ways, in the interface, you will see the proposal from the source planner, and you will also see planning notes. Okay, that is to leave track in the solution. If you're asking from a supply chain manager perspective, okay, you will have the plan prepared by the local source planner, and you will be able to see his or her planning notes, and you will be proposing your plan if there are changes or not. Okay, this is like general official communication in the supply chain planning or interaction. So let me show you how it looks. It's very it's similar to the previous template that we showed. Okay, so now for the demand and source planning, we will open a new template. Okay, before you remember that we came here to open a template that was gross demand. Now we will open another one that is called LSP, local source planning, and there is another one for services. So both work in the same way. Pretty much, because they are different, but the step of the supply chain manager is exactly the same. So I will open it. Okay, there is a comment from Ruri. Is there any layer of approval by HQ or anyone else of the source planning? Is the approval process of the plan kept at local level? I think the approval of the plan is done at local level. What we have here, because it's where the delegation of authority stays, I think, right? So what do we have here? It's a review. Oh, I think I'm in the wrong. 1 second. I wanted to show the other one. Where am I? Just 1 second. Here. This. So we have the plan is prepared by the local source planner, and what the HQ source planner is sending is a proposal. Okay. And then what we get from the category management review is a recommendation. Okay. But the source plan is done, finalized at entity level, where the delegation of authority stays. Okay. I believe that if there are recommendations and for some reason are not followed or something, I guess you have the planning notes to justify and keep track of that. Okay, thank you, Rick. We appreciate your questions because then you know that you're listening to us, because in this distance training sometimes it's too quiet. Okay, so I will open one of the templates, but of course, as I said, you have one for services and one for goods. Okay, but just I want to show the final this final touch that we do in the as a supply chain manager. So I will select for the filter maybe these ones. Okay, I have 2 plans here selected. Maybe let me take one of them only. Okay. Oh, I need to copy the filter. This is something that you don't know because in the gross demand we didn't mention because there is only one tab. If there are multiple tabs, I think it's worth using this functionality to copy filters to all the tabs, so we get the data filtered. Just give me 1 second. I know we have only 10 minutes, but it should be enough. Okay. Yeah, and as a contract, I need to filter by one contract. Otherwise, the template is going to, I have to filter by some contract, so it doesn't take too long. I think I have here a filter for the contracts. It should be okay. So now what is loading, what I want to represent here is not the full end-to-end process of the local source plan, but how we're going to get the source plan for the local source planner, and if we agree, what we need to do. If we don't agree, what how we, let's say, put our plan. Okay, but I understand there will be a lot. This is all at entity level, so there will be a lot of interaction between the local source planner and the supply chain map. Okay, so I'm going to generate a situation where we already went through all this process. Actually, I will perform directly that one to simplify it for you and also to have it ready in the last minute. Okay, thank you for, if you are still listening to us, thank you for staying there. Okay. Okay, so just while it's loading, it's taking a bit of time because I just opened it. I should have opened it in the last break. So let me just recap, looking at the agenda. So I think we went through the overview of gross demand and net demand, even though we did into different moments because it was too much to be presented in one shot. We performed the demonstration of the EPP header creation and the general settings for the EPP. Brian also showed the dollarization, and I showed the gross demand adjustment. Okay. Now we are going to mention, we covered the source planning process in general, and in the part of the demo, it's really, really very short. Okay, so if you open the net demand LSP template that is already open, you should go to source plan. If you are the supply chain manager, and you will get here a source plan that was prepared by the local source planner. So in one of these products, for example, let me focus. Okay, this is computer. There are too many, maybe. Let me focus on this product here. So you see This is actually laptops, right? Yeah. Okay, let's take the laptops. So let me filter by computer laptop for a moment. Because otherwise there are too many numbers and it's not a good idea. So we keep only one product. So you see how it works. So here we'll get, for the product that I'm displaying, the different sourcing options that are available for our entity. Okay, so we have, for the computer, we have a source plan that was didn't have any contract assigned. Okay, that is not the one I want to discuss with you. Okay, but we have another source plan that selected this contract, this 47.0. This is a contract of a supplier that has a contract that is still released. Okay, and we have a source plan already prepared by the system, and it's already accepted by the initial, it's sent as an initial source plan. Maybe this 18, this 18 that we're marking red were acquired through an internal source, and that's why they are not visible. So in this template, we have a number of key figures, but the most relevant for you as a supply chain manager, it is the source plan. Okay, the source plan is what came from the system. The second key figure, called LSP initial source plan, that is now in green, is what was prepared by the local source plan. Okay, you see it here, source plan and then initial source plan. Each of these boxes is represented by a key figure in the system, by a row. Okay, now the initial source plan went to UNSQ review. Okay, so let's assume they already did a review source plan, they already did a source plan, they proposed, and we got from this category management reviewer the recommended source plan after their review. And let's assume that we got it like this. Okay, I will put it in orange. Okay, then let's say that the local source plan reviews this and it says, okay, I agree with that, but you know what? Instead of 120 here and 220, we are going to request, I don't know, 350 here, and we don't order anything. Okay. Actually, it will be 332, no? Not to order too much. So let's say that this is the adjusted source plan, okay, that you are getting from the source plan if you are the supply chain manager. So if I go back to this end-to-end, the adjusted source plan is what comes to you. So when you will open the template, you will see like this. What is missing is only one line that is called supply chain manager adjusted source plan. So you as a supply chain manager, you only need to do this. If you agree with the source plan and the contract that is assigned, you will copy, you will paste here, and you say, okay, this is my adjusted source plan. I'm not changing anything. So I go here and I click on Save Data. Okay, I'm going to remove this thing because I believe it will give an error because I'm not in the template to save it. And this is it. So you will save your adjusted source plan like this is like your final approval of the source plan. Now, if it happens that after discussion with the local source plan, you don't agree to acquire these 332 from here because you believe there will be lead time and you want to get them from a different contract, then we'll see what are the contracts available. Okay, this one is expired, so it's not the best example. But if there is any contract that you think you can use, you will say, no, I'm not getting it from here. This part, we don't get it from here. And we discuss, and we are getting that one from this other contract. Okay, that is another block of data. So you will put that in the adjusted source plan of the month where you want to be. Okay, it was 332, so we enter it here. But the adjusted source plan is your key figure. This is where you're going to be, if you are a supply chain manager, you're going to be confirming that you agree with the source plan and then identifying the source. 332 will be acquired from this one and the other one will be acquired. And that's all. Thank you, Camila, for letting us know. Do you have any question? I know it's a very short introduction, a lot of concepts, but I think you will be now in a better condition to start with the operationalization. So when they ask to maybe to adjust gross demand or something, or when you talk to your local demand planners or your local source planners, if they ask to create APP header, you can always come to the recording and do it. Okay, and of course you can always write to us, and we'll try to help you as much as possible. Okay, that's all from my side, Brian. As you can see, the interaction of the supply chain manager is at the very end, and it's only if they agree, it's only copying the demand plan to their key figure, or they can add it to somewhere else if there is a better option. But I believe these changes will be mainly done by the local source plan. Over to you, Brian, for your closing remarks, if you have anything to add. Or I'm not sure if Brian is connected, because I got a message from me as well. So otherwise,
Yeah, I'm still here, David.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Thank you. I forgot.
No further remarks.
Okay,
Good presentation. I know it was a lot of content, so thank you, David, for your time, and thank you all for participating.
And thank you so much if you stayed there for these 4 hours, because we know you're very busy and it was very difficult to follow too much maybe content. I would also suggest that to keep it in maybe 2 days if it's possible. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Take care, and let's stay in touch. This is only the beginning of